Chapter 1: The Concrete Heart. The government-issued sedan moved without a sound, a black predator on a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the desolate Nevada landscape. Dr. Annalise Sachs watched the salt flats glitter under a merciless sun. The heat created shimmering apparitions on the horizon, mirages of water where there was only cracked earth and sagebrush. Her own reflection stared from the tinted window, a woman with intelligent, tired eyes, her dark hair pulled into a severe bun. The reflection was a stranger. The woman she used to be, the one who published papers on REM cycle anomalies and lectured at symposia, would not recognize this severe, silent passenger. They passed the final public sign miles ago. It read, "Unincorporated Territory." It was an understatement. This was a void on the map, a place deliberately forgotten. A high-voltage fence materialized from the heat haze, stretching for miles in either direction, its metal posts marching over the low hills like skeletal soldiers. At the gate, a concrete blockhouse stood guard. Men in crisp, dark uniforms and body armor emerged, rifles held at a low ready. They were not smiling. One approached the driver's side while another, a younger man with a face devoid of expression, circled the vehicle with a mirror on a long pole, checking the undercarriage. The driver, a silent man in a dark suit, lowered his window. He passed a laminated card to the guard. The guard inspected it, then looked into the car, his gaze falling on Annalise. His eyes were like polished stones. "Passenger is Dr. Sachs. Expected," the driver said. His voice was gravelly, unused. The guard nodded once. He stepped away and spoke into his radio. A heavy, articulated gate groaned open, revealing a paved compound. The main building was a brutalist masterpiece of poured concrete and recessed, slit-like windows. It looked less like a research facility and more like a bunker designed to withstand a direct nuclear strike. There were no signs, no logos, no welcoming messages. Only function. Cold, hard function. The sedan pulled up to a steel entrance. The driver killed the engine, plunging them into a sudden, thick silence. "They will meet you inside," he said, his first full sentence to her in the 4-hour drive from the airport. He made no move to get out. Annalise took a breath, the air in the car tasting stale and artificial. She opened her door and stepped out into a blast of dry heat. The concrete walls of the facility seemed to absorb the sunlight, radiating a suffocating warmth. The steel door hissed open before she reached it. A woman stood there. She was tall, with a lean, athletic build encased in a perfectly tailored military uniform. Her name tag read Reed. Her short blonde hair was severe, her expression neutral. It was a face practiced in hiding thoughts. "Dr. Sachs, I am Major Evelyn Reed. Welcome to the Sand Spear facility." Her voice was clear and direct. "The colonel is waiting for you." Annalise nodded, her throat too dry for a reply. She followed the major into the building. The heat vanished, replaced by an aggressive, humming chill. The air smelled of ozone and industrial cleaning agents. The corridors were long, gray, and lit by recessed fluorescent strips that cast no shadows. Their footsteps echoed with a sharp, clinical precision. There were no pictures on the walls, no stray pieces of paper, no sign of human messiness. Every corner was a perfect right angle. "I was the director of the North California Sleep Institute for 6 years, Major," Annalise said, her voice tight. My work was therapeutic. We helped people. Your work was groundbreaking, Doctor, Reed replied without turning. You created a stable, navigable bridge into human consciousness. That has applications beyond curring nightmares about final exams. This is a conscription. My staff was dismissed. My research was seized. My name was attached to a national security directive I was not allowed to read. You are a patriot, Doctor. Your country requires your expertise. The words hung in the sterile air, stripped of any real meaning. They arrived at a heavy door with a digital keypad. Reed placed her thumb on a scanner. The lock clicked open. The colonel's office. He prefers to be called Valerius. The office was as Spartan as the rest of the facility, dominated by a large desk made of dark, polished wood. A man stood at the far window, looking out at the featureless desert. He turned as they entered. This was Colonel Marcus Valerius. He was older than Reed, with salt and pepper hair cut brutally short. His face was a collection of hard lines and sharp angles, but his eyes were the most arresting feature. They were a pale, piercing blue, and they appraised Annalise with an unnerving intensity. A faint, geometric scar, thin as a spider's thread, crossed his left temple. Dr. Sachs, he said. His voice was a low baritone, a voice accustomed to command. Thank you for your cooperation. I was not given a choice, Colonel. A flicker of something, not quite a smile, touched his lips. Choice is a luxury, Doctor. We deal in necessities. Please sit. He gestured to one of two hard-backed chairs in front of his desk. Annalise sat. Reed remained standing by the door, a silent statue. Valerius moved to his desk but did not sit. He leaned against it, his arms crossed. I have read your entire body of work. Fascinating. The Sachs-Watanabe theorem of induced neurocognitive access. The development of the Dreamweaver interface. You mapped the subconscious. You turned ephemeral thought into analyzable data. I was trying to understand trauma, to heal it. You did more than that. You found a back door. We intend to use it. He paused, letting the statement settle. 2 years ago, during a deep-level session at your institute, a patient, a former war correspondent named Alastair Finch, had a catastrophic psychic event. He described a presence, something that was not a product of his own mind, something invasive. Annalise's blood ran cold. The Finch incident. It was the reason the institute was shut down. The official report cited equipment malfunction and patient psychosis. She was the only one who saw the raw data, the impossible energy signature that appeared in the system. Mr. Finch entered a permanent catatonic state, she said, her voice a low whisper. A regrettable loss, Valerius said, his tone devoid of regret, but a necessary one. His mind was the first to make contact. He was the first casualty in a war we did not realize we were fighting. What he encountered, Doctor, we have isolated it, we have contained it, and we have given it a name. He picked up a tablet from his desk and slid it across the polished surface toward her. We call it Karen. Annalise picked up the tablet. The screen showed a video file, a recording from inside the system. Hesitantly, she pressed play. The image was a real-time recording from a deep dream session. The perspective was first person, the dreamer's view. The environment was a shifting, unstable memory. A child's bedroom, pastel walls, a single bed. But the colors were bleeding at the edges, the geometry subtly wrong. A sense of profound dread saturated the image, a non-visual signal that the system translated as a low, throbbing hum. "This is the dreamscape of a test subject," Reed's voice explained from the doorway. "A volunteer. A death row inmate," Analyze corrected, not looking up. "His service is more valuable here than in a lethal injection suite," Valerius stated flatly. On the screen, the dreamer's perspective panned frantically. The bedroom was decaying, the walls seeming to sweat a dark, oily substance. The pastel wallpaper peeled away to reveal something that looked like raw, twitching muscle underneath. Then the dreamer looked toward the corner of the room. It was there. At first, it was just a deepening of the shadow, a place where the light seemed to be devoured. Then the shadow began to take on a form. It was tall, impossibly tall, its head scraping the ceiling, which now seemed to be miles away. It was humanoid, but its proportions were all wrong. The limbs were too long, the joints bending at unnatural angles. It had no face, only a smooth, blank expanse of deeper darkness. It did not move, yet it seemed to get closer. It was a static image of pure malice. Annalise felt her breath catch in her throat. This was what she saw in Finch's data stream, the corrupted signal she could not explain. The man in the corner. "Our mission here, Doctor, is simple," Valerius said, his voice cutting through the hum from the tablet. "Your institute used the Dreamweaver to observe. We are going to refine it. We are going to turn it into a delivery system. You built a window. We are going to turn that window into a weapon. You are going to teach us how to aim Karen." On the screen, the shape in the corner took a step forward. It didn't walk. The space between it and the dreamer simply compressed. The low hum intensified into a high-pitched shriek of digital feedback. The dreamer's view tilted wildly. A sound like tearing fabric filled the audio feed. The video dissolved into a blast of static. The file ended. Annalise's own pale, horrified face stared from the dark screen. Her hands trembled. "You're insane," she breathed. "This is not a weapon. This is an extinction event waiting to happen. It's a force. You can't aim a hurricane." Valerius finally smiled, a cold, thin line. "That, Doctor, is where you are mistaken. We can, we will, and you are going to show us how." He pushed himself off the desk and walked to the door. "Major Reed will show you to your quarters and the laboratory. Work begins at 600. Welcome to Project Chimera." He left. The door closed with a solid, final thud. Annalise was alone with the Major and the ghost on the screen. The humming chill of the facility felt like it was seeping into her bones. She was in a concrete tomb, miles from anywhere, tasked with weaponizing a god of nightmares. Chapter 2, Subject 0. The laboratory was a cathedral of cold steel and glass. It was circular, with a central raised observation deck, the pit, overlooking a ring of sealed medical chambers below. Banks of monitors covered every wall, displaying everything from biometric data to real-time neural activity maps, glowing green and blue in the semi-darkness. The air itself thrummed with the energy of the massive server banks housed in the sub-level, the heart of the Dreamweaver, now repurposed and amplified 100-fold. Annalise recognized the core architecture of her own design, but it was twisted, militarized. Where she had soft lighting and comfortable chairs, there was now hard metal and ruthless efficiency. "This is your station, Doctor." Major Reed gestured to a console in the pit. It was a semicircular desk with a half-dozen screens, a complex keyboard, and a series of high-fidelity dials for modulating the frequency of the neurocognitive link. Her old system had a single dial. This one had 20. "What have you done to it?" Annalise asked, running a hand over the cold metal of the console. "Upgrades," a new voice said. A man emerged from behind a server rack. He was young, with a shock of unruly black hair and glasses perched on his nose. His lab coat was stained with coffee. This was Dr. Kenji Tanaka, the lead tech specialist. He vibrated with a nervous, brilliant energy. "Colonel Valerius gave me your schematics and a blank check. I rebuilt the core processor, quadrupled the bandwidth, and shielded the whole system against external psychic interference. Or internal psychic explosions, in theory." "You've turned a scalpel into a sledgehammer," Annalise said. Tanaka grinned, a flash of white teeth. "A sledgehammer that can perform brain surgery from a mile away. It's beautiful." Valerius entered the pit, his presence immediately silencing the low chatter of the half-dozen technicians who manned the other consoles. He moved to the central railing and looked down into Chamber 1. Inside the sterile, glass-walled room, a man lay on a medical bed. He was thin, with pale skin and a haunted look in his eyes. Wires snaked from a sleek, silver circlet on his head to a machine beside the bed. This was Clay Ogden, Subject 0, convicted of a murder he swore he did not commit. He was their first volunteer. "Is he ready?" Valerius asked, his voice calm. "Vitals are stable. REM sleep induced 30 minutes ago. The dreamscape is stabilized and mapped," Tanaka reported, his fingers flying across his keyboard. "It's a mundane one, a childhood memory, fishing with his father." "Perfect. A stable, low-stress environment," Valerius said. "Dr. Sachs, it's time. We need a baseline test. A simple contact. You will guide the session. Show my team how to identify the entity's signature before it fully manifests." Annalise's stomach clenched. "I will not." Valerius turned his pale blue eyes on her. They were as cold and empty as the desert sky. "This is not a request, Doctor. You are a civilian consultant under military authority in a classified weapons development program. Your refusal to cooperate will be noted as insubordination. You will be confined to your quarters, and we will proceed without you. The only difference is that my team will be learning on the job, and Mr. Ogden will be at significantly greater risk. The choice, as always, is yours." The threat was clear, wrapped in the chilling logic of command. He was making her complicit. If she refused, Ogden's blood would be on her hands. She looked from Valerius's implacable face to Ogden's form on the bed below. He looked so fragile, a lamb to the slaughter. With a heavy heart, she sat at her console. Her fingers found the controls, muscle memory taking over. "Bring his dreamscape up on the main screen." Tanaka complied. The large central monitor flickered to life, showing Ogden's first-person perspective. He was sitting on a wooden dock, his bare feet dangling just above the surface of a placid lake. Sunlight filtered through tall pine trees. The water was a deep, tranquil blue. The sound of crickets and lapping water was peaceful. "Okay," Annalise began, her voice professional despite the tremor in her hands. "The stability of the construct is at 98%. That's good. It means his subconscious is not under duress. Now watch the energy signature readouts on the right. Karen doesn't just appear, it infects the dream. It's a cancer." She worked the dials, her touch light and precise. "I'm gently pushing the frequency deeper toward the limbic system. We're not aiming for it, we're just listening, making the environment more receptive to its frequency." For several minutes, nothing happened. The peaceful scene on the lake remained. The technicians watched their screens, their faces illuminated by the green glow. Valerius stood behind Annalise, his arms crossed, a silent specter of authority. "There," Annalise whispered. She pointed to a small, jagged spike on the energy graph. "You see that? That's not Ogden's neural activity. It's an anomaly, an intruder." On the main screen, a subtle change occurred. The sunlight filtering through the trees seemed to dim just for a second. A single cloud passed over the sun. "It's noticed the opening," she said. "It's testing the connection." "Push it," Valerius commanded. "Colonel, that's not advisable. A slow approach is." "Push it, Doctor." Annalise's jaw tightened. She complied, turning the dial another fraction of a millimeter. The jagged spike on the graph grew, branching out like frost on a window pane. In the dream, the water of the lake turned dark, the tranquil blue becoming a murky, impenetrable black. The sound of the crickets stopped. A profound silence fell over the scene. Ogden's perspective shifted. He looked away from the water, toward the dense woods at the edge of the lake. "His heart rate is increasing," a technician called out. 7582. "Hold it there," Annalise said, her hand hovering over the controls. Between two of the pine trees, deep in the shadows, something stood. It was just a shape darker than the surrounding gloom. It was tall and thin. It was perfectly still. "We have visual confirmation," Reed said, her voice tight with excitement. "Karen has entered the construct." "Look at the energy readings," Annalise instructed, her voice urgent. "It's drawing power from the environment itself. The construct stability is dropping. 91%, 85. The idyllic fishing scene was dissolving. The green pine needles turned black and began to fall like ash. The wooden dock under Ogden's feet started to rot, splinters curling up like dead fingers. "Fascinating," Valerius murmured. "It feeds on the very fabric of the dream." "His blood pressure is spiking," another technician shouted. 180 over 110. "Pull him out," Annalise demanded, reaching for the emergency disconnect. Valerius's hand shot out and clamped down on her wrist. His grip was like iron. "Not yet. We need more data. How does it attack? What is the kill vector?" "You're going to kill him," she hissed, struggling against his grip. On the screen, the shape in the woods took a step forward. Its form clarified. The long, wrong limbs, the featureless face. It was Karen. It raised one of its long, spindly arms and pointed a finger at Ogden. The world on the screen dissolved, not into static but into a kaleidoscope of Ogden's worst fears. Images flashed in rapid succession: a car crash, a drowning man, a morgue, a courtroom where a judge with a skull for a face slammed down a gavel. The audio feed was a cacophony of screams, sirens, and a sound like a heart beating itself to death. BP is critical. He's going into cardiac arrest. Now, doctor, Valerius said, releasing her wrist. Disconnect him. Annalise slammed her palm onto the large red button. A klaxon blared once. The main screen went black. The link was severed. In the glass chamber below, Ogden's body convulsed on the bed. A medical team, which had been waiting on standby, rushed into the room. They swarmed his body with defibrillator paddles and syringes. "Get him stabilized," Reed yelled into her headset. Annalise stared at her hands. They were shaking violently. She had just participated in the torture of a man, guiding the monster to his psychic door. She looked up at Valerius. He was not looking at the frantic medical efforts below. He was staring at the blank screen, a look of profound, terrifying satisfaction on his face. "Excellent work, Doctor," he said. "The baseline is established. Tomorrow we begin calibration." The medical team finally got Ogden's heart beating in a regular rhythm. He was alive. For now. Annalise looked at his still form, then at the colonel. She was trapped in a room with a man far more monstrous than the entity he sought to control, and she was his primary tool. Later that night, as she tried and failed to sleep in her small, concrete room, she noticed something. A single dark moth was fluttering against the inside of her window, its wings beating a silent, desperate rhythm against the reinforced glass. She had never seen a moth like it before. Its wings were the color of ash. A grief moth. She watched it until it tired and fell to the sill, a tiny speck of dream world despair that had somehow followed her into the waking world. Chapter 3, Subject Scythe. Clay Ogden survived. The official report on Annalise's desk called it a successful recovery from extreme cardiac distress. She called it a miracle. He was transferred out of Chamber 1 and into a long-term medical ward somewhere in the facility's labyrinthine depths. Out of sight, out of mind. Valerius had his baseline. He had his data. He was finished with Subject 0. For 2 days, the pit was a hive of activity. Tanaka and his team analyzed the data from Ogden's session, breaking down Karen's energy signature into quantifiable metrics. They created algorithms to predict its manifestation, to map its psychic trajectory. Annalise was forced to consult, to translate the raw horror of the event into cold, usable numbers. She pointed out the subtle fluctuations that preceded the attack, the specific frequencies the entity seemed to favor. Each piece of information she gave them felt like a betrayal. She was teaching them how to load the gun. On the 3rd day, Valerius called a meeting in the central observation deck. He stood before a large monitor, his posture rigid, his hands clasped behind his back. Reed stood at his side. Tanaka leaned against a console, chewing on a pen. Annalise stood apart from them, her arms crossed, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. "The data from the initial trial is promising," Valerius began. his voice echoing in the quiet room. Dr. Tanaka has developed a preliminary targeting model. We can now, with a 67% probability, predict the point of entry Karen will use to access a given dream construct. It's all about resonance, Tanaka chimed in, unable to contain his excitement. Karen is drawn to psychic trauma like a shark to blood. If we can artificially create a resonance point, a psychic chum bucket, we can theoretically guide its attention. The next phase of the project requires a different kind of subject, Valerius continued, his gaze sweeping over them. Subject 0 was a man defined by fear. His mind was brittle, a poor defense. We need to test the weapon's efficacy against a different sort of consciousness. We need to know what happens when Karen encounters a mind that is not afraid. He nodded to Reed. The major tapped a command into a nearby console. The main screen lit up with a personnel file. A mugshot showed a man in his late 30s. He had intelligent, dark eyes, a sharp jawline, and a faint, mocking smirk on his lips. His hair was dark and neatly combed. He looked more like a professor than a prisoner. The name on the file read, Dominic Cray. Dominic Cray, Valerius said, convicted of 11 counts of first-degree murder, suspected in at least 20 more, IQ of 145, diagnosed with extreme psychopathy, narcissism, and a complete lack of empathy. His victims were selected and dispatched with a chilling precision. The press called him the Surgeon of Sacramento. Valerius paused. We will call him Subject Scythe. Analyze felt a wave of nausea. You can't be serious. You want to put that mind into the system. A man like Cray, his subconscious is not a place of fear. It's a predator's den. You have no idea what you will unleash. On the contrary, Doctor, Valerius countered smoothly. That is precisely what we intend to find out. Does Karen feed on fear, or does it feed on any strong emotion? Can it be confused or repelled by a mind that welcomes violence? Cray is not a sheep for the slaughter. He is a wolf. We want to see what happens when we put another wolf in the cage with it. This is reckless, Annalise pleaded, her voice rising. The system is an amplifier. You will be amplifying a consciousness like Cray. You could create a monster far worse than the one you're trying to control. The two could merge, or the system could imprint on his psyche instead of Ogden's. Your concerns are noted, Doctor, Valerius said, the words a clear dismissal. Subject Scythe is being transferred to Chamber 2 as we speak. The session is scheduled for 1400 hours. I won't do it, Annalise said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fury and terror. I will not be the one to open that door. Find another way. Valerius walked slowly toward her, his footsteps silent on the metal floor. He stopped a few feet away, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. You seem to be under the impression that your participation is a matter of debate. It is not. You are the only person on this project who has piloted a session from start to finish. You have an intuitive understanding of the system that Tanaka, for all his genius, lacks. You will be at the console. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a low, confidential tone. Think of it this way, Doctor. You believe this is a mistake. The only way to prove is through data, and the only way to get is to run the experiment. Perhaps you are right. Perhaps it will be a catastrophe. Wouldn't you prefer to have your hands on the emergency switch when it happens? He was twisting her own morality against her again, framing her participation as a preventative measure. It was a vile, brilliant piece of manipulation. He straightened up. 1400 hours, doctor. Do not be late. He turned and strode from the room. Reed gave Annalise a brief, unreadable look before following him. Tanaka avoided her gaze, suddenly fascinated by the scuff marks on his shoes. Annalise was left alone in the silent pit, the mocking smirk of Dominic Cray staring at her from the giant screen. At 1350, she was at her station. Her face was pale, her hands steady only through sheer force of will. Below, in Chamber 2, Dominic Cray lay on the medical bed. Unlike Ogden, he was not passive. As the technicians attached the electrodes of the neural circlet to his temples, he watched them with an unnerving, predatory calm. He smiled at one of them, a young woman who flinched and looked away. Annalise could hear his voice through the comms, a smooth, cultured baritone that sent a shiver down her spine. Such fascinating equipment, Cray was saying. All this for little old me. I'm flattered. Tell me, is the pretty doctor with the sad eyes watching from above? I do hope so. I'd hate to perform to an empty house. Annalise's fingers tightened on the console. She felt like an insect under a microscope. Valerius and Reed entered the pit, taking their positions behind her. Is the subject sedated? Valerius asked. Inducing REM sleep now, Tanaka reported. He's resisting. His brainwave patterns are unusual, highly disciplined. He's fighting the sedative on a cognitive level. Increase the dosage, Valerius ordered. For a moment, Cray's eyes fluttered on the monitor showing his face. Then they closed. His body went still. He's under, Tanaka confirmed. Vitals stable, bringing his dreamscape online. Annalise stared at the main screen, her heart pounding against her ribs. She expected a nightmare world, a landscape of blood and horror. What appeared was shockingly mundane. It was a library, a vast, impossibly large library. Polished mahogany shelves stretched up into a darkness far above. The air was still and smelled of old paper and leather. There was no sound. The silence was absolute perfect. Construct stability is 100%, Tanaka said, a note of awe in his voice. I've never seen a mind this orderly. It's a fortress. Where are the books? Reed asked, leaning forward. Annalise saw it too. The endless shelves were completely empty, every single one. It was a library with no books, a repository with nothing to store. This isn't a memory, Annalise whispered. This is a construct, a purpose-built mental landscape. He created this place. It's his waiting room. Then let's give him a visitor, Valerius said, his voice laced with grim anticipation. Dr. Sachs, begin the sequence. Annalise took a shaky breath. She looked at the empty shelves, at the perfect, sterile order of a killer's mind. She placed her fingers on the dials. This time, she wasn't just opening a door for a monster. She was inviting it into the home of another, and she had no idea which one would be the guest and which one would be the host. Chapter 4: The Red Labyrinth. The silence of Dominic Cray's mental library was profound. It was not an absence of sound, but an active, pressing void. Annalise began the sequence, her touch on the dials lighter, more hesitant than before. She gently modulated the frequencies, creating the psychic resonance, the chum that Tanaka had so crudely described. Energy signature anomaly detected, a technician reported, his voice tight. It's faint, but it's there. On the main screen in the dreamer's perspective, nothing changed. The vast, empty library remained still and perfect, but Annalise felt it through the system's haptic feedback, a subtle, cold vibration under her fingertips. Karen was here. It was lurking just beyond the edges of the construct, cautious. It's not entering, Reed observed. With Ogden, it was almost immediate. It's examining the construct, Annalise explained, her eyes glued to the energy graphs. It's like a predator sniffing at a strange new burrow, trying to decide if the occupant is prey. Increase the amplification, Valerius ordered. Force its hand. Annalise complied, her movement stiff. She pushed the gain, widening the psychic doorway. The cold vibration in the console intensified. In the library, a single dark shape coalesced at the far end of a long aisle. It was Karen, a figure of pure negative space against the polished wood. It stood motionless, an ink blot on a perfect page. And then something unexpected happened. The dreamer's perspective, Cray's perspective, did not panic. It did not try to flee. It moved toward the entity. The point of view glided smoothly down the aisle, a deliberate, measured approach. It was the movement of a host greeting a guest, not a victim facing a killer. "What is he doing?" Tanaka muttered. "His vitals are unchanged," a medic reported. "No increase in heart rate, no spike in blood pressure. He's perfectly calm." Cray's dream self stopped a respectful distance from Karen. The entity remained still, a pillar of shadow. Then the world changed. The mahogany shelves of the library dissolved. The polished floors cracked and split apart. The entire construct collapsed, not into chaos, but into a new, equally ordered shape. They were now in a labyrinth. The walls were made of a dark, crimson stone that seemed to pulse with a faint, internal light. The ground was black, polished obsidian. The air grew thick, heavy with the metallic scent of old blood. "My God," Annalise breathed. He collapsed the construct. He pulled it down and rebuilt it around them. This was the Red Labyrinth, Cray's true mind. The library was just a facade, an empty lobby. This was the trophy room. "Look," Reed said, pointing to the walls of the maze. Carved into the crimson stone were scenes. Not pictures, but sculpted, three-dimensional reliefs. They depicted acts of horrific violence, rendered with the loving, meticulous detail of a master artist. Annalise recognized some of them from the case file photos. The surgeon of Sacramento's terrible work, immortalized in the architecture of his own mind. Cray's perspective turned. Karen was still there, now standing at the entrance to the labyrinth, it seemed. Smaller, less imposing, confused. A voice echoed through the labyrinth and through the comms in the pit. It was Cray's voice, smooth and resonant, but it originated from within the dream itself. "An impressive specimen," the dream voice said. It has no substance, yet it has presence. It feeds on fear, doesn't it? I'm afraid you will find the larder is bare here. He's communicating, Tanaka stammered, pushing his glasses up his nose. Directly. The system isn't supposed to allow for that level of lucid articulation. He's not using the system, Annelies realized with a dawning horror. He's using his own mind as a transmitter. The discipline is impossible. Karen took a hesitant step into the labyrinth. Its shadowy form seemed to flicker, destabilized by the environment. The walls pulsed with a stronger crimson light, fueled by Cray's pride, his utter lack of fear. "You are a weapon," Cray's voice continued, a note of academic curiosity in it. "Sent by the men in the glass box above. They wish to point you, to aim you. A fascinating concept. But you see, you have wandered into my gallery, and here I am the only curator." The perspective moved again, leading Karen deeper into the maze. It was a tour. Cray was showing off his work. As they passed each carved mural, the scene would animate, playing out a silent, gruesome ballet of death. Karen followed, its movement sluggish. The energy it was giving off was changing. The sharp, aggressive spikes were gone, replaced by a low, confused thrum. "What is happening?" Valerius demanded, his voice tight. "Why isn't it attacking?" "It can't," Annelies said, her eyes wide. "Its primary weapon is terror. It causes a psychic cascade failure fueled by the victim's own mind. But Cray has no fear. His mind isn't a source of fuel. It's a rival power source. It's poisoning it." On the screen, Cray led Karen to the center of the labyrinth. In the middle of a circular chamber was a single, empty pedestal of black stone. "I have room for a new piece in my collection," Cray's voice whispered. "And you, my friend, are a masterpiece of abstract horror, a true original." The walls of the labyrinth began to close in. The crimson light intensified, pulsing in time with Cray's calm, steady heartbeat. Karen began to convulse. Its shadowy form distorted, stretching and contracting like it was in agony. It let out a silent, psychic scream that manifested on the energy graphs as a massive, chaotic wave of power. Red lights flashed across the consoles in the pit. Alarms blared. "System overload. The psychic feedback is off the charts," Tanaka yelled, frantically trying to erect firewalls. "The core is overheating." "Shut it down," Valerius roared. "Disconnect him now." Annelies didn't need to be told. She slammed her hand on the emergency disconnect. The button was dead. The system was locked in a feedback loop, caught between the psychic energies of the two entities. "It's not responding," she shouted over the alarms. On the main screen, the labyrinth was compressing, crushing Karen. The entity's form began to fracture, breaking apart into smaller pieces of shadow. But it wasn't dying. It was being analyzed, deconstructed. Cray's dream self reached out a hand. He plucked one of the writhing fragments of Karen from the air. He held it up, examining it like a diamond. "Incredible," his voice sighed. "The structure is almost linguistic, not just a monster, a message, a language of terror." He closed his hand around the fragment, and the entire system blew. The main screen exploded in a shower of sparks. Consoles across the pit shorted out, emitting plumes of acrid smoke. The lights flickered and died, plunging the room into emergency lighting, a hellish, rotating red glow. Containment breach in the core, Tanaka screamed, shielding his face from a shower of sparks. It's a complete system failure. In the chamber below, Cray's body arched on the bed, a single violent convulsion. Then he went still. Analyze stared at the smoking, shattered ruin of the main screen. The experiment was over. It was a catastrophe, but not the one she had predicted. They had not just failed to aim the weapon. They had handed it to the enemy. They had taught a monster a new language, and she had no idea what he would say with it. Chapter 5: An Acceptable Loss. The aftermath was a scene of controlled chaos. The rotating red emergency lights painted the smoke-filled pit in frantic, strobing flashes. Technicians with fire extinguishers swarmed the shorted-out consoles. The acrid smell of burnt electronics was thick in the air. Annalise sat frozen at her dead station, the echoes of the alarms still ringing in her ears. Her hands were covered in a fine layer of dust from the exploded monitor. She could still see the final image from the dreamscape burned onto her retinas. Dominic Cray's hand closing around a fragment of pure darkness. Major Reed was barking orders, her voice cutting through the din with practiced authority. Get a medical team to Chamber 2. Full assessment on subject Scythe. Tanaka, damage report on the core now. Dr. Tanaka, his face pale and smudged with soot, staggered back from a smoking server rack. The primary and secondary cores are fused. The entire system. It's slag. It's a $50 million paperweight. Valerius stood amidst the wreckage, untouched. He was not looking at the destroyed equipment. He was staring down into Chamber 2, where the medical team was working on Dominic Cray. His expression was not one of anger or failure. It was one of intense, calculating concentration. Annalise pushed herself away from her console and stumbled toward the railing. Down below, the scene was eerily calm. Cray's vitals were displayed on a portable monitor. They were perfectly normal. Heart rate, blood pressure, brain activity, all were as steady and placid as a sleeping child. One of the medics shone a penlight into Cray's eyes. His pupils responded normally. He was, by all medical definitions, completely unharmed. He's stable, Colonel, the lead medic reported over the comm. In fact, he's perfect. No signs of distress whatsoever. Valerius nodded slowly. Leave him. Secure the chamber. No one in or out without my direct authorization. He turned, his gaze sweeping over the ruined pit. It finally settled on Annalise. He walked toward her, his boots crunching on shards of glass. An unforeseen outcome, Doctor, he said, his voice level. Unforeseen, Annalise's voice was a choked whisper. Colonel, you don't understand what happened. Cray didn't just resist it, he absorbed a part of it, he deconstructed it, he learned from it. The system failure is a setback, Valerius conceded. The loss of the hardware is regrettable. The hardware, she repeated, incredulous. We may have just created a psychic entity with the mind of a serial killer and the abilities of a trans-dimensional horror. We are not talking about hardware. "Your assessment is noted," Valerius said, his tone dismissive. He addressed the room at large. "Major Reed, begin a full diagnostic on the core. I want to know if anything is salvageable. Tanaka, I want a theoretical model for a new system, a Mark II, on my desk by 800. One with triple the shielding and independent circuit breakers." He was already planning to rebuild, to try again. The sheer scale of his hubris was breathtaking. "You are insane," Analyze said, the words coming out flat and dead. "This project is over, you failed." Valerius turned his full attention back to her. His pale blue eyes were chips of ice. "Failure is a matter of perspective, Doctor. The objective was to see if Karen could be controlled. The answer is no. A valuable piece of intelligence. The secondary objective was to test its capabilities against a hostile, disciplined mind. The result was a cascading system failure. An acceptable loss." Acceptable loss. "We lost equipment. We did not lose personnel. We did not lose the subject. And we gained an entirely new data set. We now know that Karen's energy is not just a force, it is a structure. It can be broken down. It can be integrated. This is not the end of the project, Doctor. It is a new beginning." He was going to turn his attention to Cray. He saw what happened not as a catastrophe but as a breakthrough. He wanted to study the synthesis. A cold dread, heavier and more real than any she had felt before, settled over Analyze. This was no longer about aiming a monster. This was about cultivating a new one. She backed away from him, shaking her head. "No, I'm done. My contract is with the Department of Defense, and I am officially stating that this project is an imminent and catastrophic threat. I am invoking my right to be removed." "Your rights are conditional to the security parameters of this facility, Doctor," Valerius said calmly. "You are not going anywhere. Your knowledge of the initial system and now your first-hand experience of this event makes you the single most valuable asset I have." He gestured to two armed guards who had moved to flank the exit. "You are confined to your quarters until further notice. For your own safety, of course." Checkmate, she was a prisoner. Defeated, Analyze turned and walked toward the exit, the guards falling into step behind her. As she passed the ruined console where Tanaka was pulling at a mess of fused wires, he looked up. His face was terrified. "Doctor," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "The feedback loop. It wasn't random. It was targeted. It didn't just overload the system. It surgically wiped all the data from the Cray session. Everything. Every log, every metric, it's all gone, except for one thing." He held up a small, blackened object in his palm. It was a solid-state memory chip from a peripheral sensory unit, one that had been blown clear of the main console during the explosion. "This is the only thing that survived," he said. Analyze looked down at the object. It wasn't the chip that caught her attention. It was what was sitting on it. A single dead moth. It was identical to the one she had seen in her room. Its ashen wings were folded. But as she stared, she saw that it was not a real moth. It was a perfect miniature sculpture. It was made of some kind of dark, crystallized material that seemed to drink the light. It looked like it was carved from solidified shadow. It was a physical object, a thing from the dream world, from Cray's mind or Karen's essence, that had survived the catastrophic failure of the system and crossed over into the waking world. The guards prodded her forward. Annalise walked out of the pit, the image of the impossible little sculpture burned into her mind. The project hadn't just failed, it had sprung a leak. The barrier between worlds was gone, and something had crawled through. Chapter 6: The Language of Moths. Annalise's quarters were a concrete box. A bed, a small desk, a toilet and sink in a tiny alcove. The window was a narrow slit of reinforced glass that offered a view of a concrete wall. She had been locked inside for 3 days. Her meals arrived on a tray, pushed through a slot in the heavy steel door. She was a prisoner in every sense of the word. She spent the first day in a state of numb shock, replaying the explosion in the pit, the image of Cray's serene face, and the impossible sculpture of the grief moth. The second day was a storm of rage at Valerius, at her own naivete, at the guards who stood impassively outside her door. The third day the rage cooled into a hard, cold resolve. Valerius was right about one thing. She was the most valuable asset he had. That meant she was too valuable to eliminate. It was leverage, however small. On the evening of the third day, the slot in her door opened. It was not a food tray. It was a single, folded piece of paper. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She snatched it up. The paper was thick, high-quality stock. Unfolding it, she saw a single sentence typed in a simple, clean font. The architect is lonely in his tower. He requests an audience with the interpreter. There was no signature, but she knew. Cray. The message was from Dominic Cray. How he managed to send it was a terrifying question. Had he bent a guard to his will? Was one of Valerius's own men now a pawn? The thought sent a chill down her spine. The architect in his tower. He was referring to himself in Chamber 2. But the interpreter, he meant her. He saw her not as a doctor or a jailer, but as someone who could understand the new language he was learning. She spent an hour staring at the note, her mind racing. This was a trap. It had to be. But it was also an opportunity. An audience with Cray was the one thing Valerius would never willingly grant her. If she could get into that chamber, if she could speak to him, she might understand the true extent of the damage. A plan, desperate and fragile, began to form. The next morning, when the food tray arrived, she refused it. She refused the lunch tray and the dinner tray. By the second day of her hunger strike, Major Reed appeared at her door. "This is a pointless gesture, Doctor," Reed said through the speaker grill. Her voice was flat, but Annalise detected a flicker of annoyance. "I need to see the subject," Annalise replied, her voice weak but firm. She was sitting on the floor, her back against the far wall. "I need to see Dominic Cray." "That is not going to happen." "Then I am going to die in this room," Annalise said. "And the foremost expert on the technology you are so desperate to rebuild will die with me. Think of the paperwork, Major. Think of how you will explain to General Maddock that you allowed the project's lead scientist to starve to death out of stubbornness." She heard nothing for a long moment. Then, the sound of Reed's footsteps receding. It was a gamble. She was betting that Valerius's pragmatism outweighed his paranoia. She was betting that he needed her alive more than he needed Cray isolated. Another full day passed. Her head swam from lack of food. The concrete room seemed to tilt and sway. Just as she felt her resolve begin to crumble, the lock on her door clicked open. Colonel Valerius stood in the doorway, flanked by two guards. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Your protest is as predictable as it is tedious, Doctor," he said. "You have made your point. You will have your audience. 10 minutes. You will be monitored. Any deviation from a direct psychological assessment will result in your immediate removal." Victory, cold and bitter, washed over her. The guards helped her to her feet. She was weak, but her mind was sharp. They led her through the sterile corridors, her legs unsteady beneath her. They did not go to the pit. They went to the medical wing. Chamber 2 was even more imposing from the outside. A thick plasteel window looked into the room. Inside, Dominic Cray sat on the edge of his bed. He was not restrained. He was wearing a simple gray jumpsuit. He looked up as they approached, and a slow, knowing smile spread across his face. "Dr. Sachs," he said. His voice was piped out through a speaker. It was the same smooth, cultured tone from the dreamscape. "I was beginning to worry you wouldn't accept my invitation." Valerius and Reed stood behind Annalise. A microphone on a stand was placed in front of her. "You have 10 minutes, Doctor," Valerius said. Annalise took a breath. "Mr. Cray, I am here to assess your psychological state following the incident." Cray chuckled, a soft, pleasant sound that was utterly chilling. "Please, Doctor, let's dispense with the formalities. We are the only two people on this miserable rock who understand what truly happened in that room. You are not here to assess me. You are here because you are terrified, and you are curious." He stood up and walked to the plasteel window, placing his hand flat against it. "They think I am the same man who walked in here, a clever psychopath in a jumpsuit. They are mistaken. The man they knew was a collector. He appreciated art, but he could not create it himself." He looked directly into Annalise's eyes. "But now I have been given a new medium, a new language, the language of moths." "What did you do to the system, Cray?" she asked, her voice low. "I didn't do anything to it," he corrected gently. "It did something to me. Or rather, we did something to each other. Your creature, Karen. It is not a being of malice. It is a being of pure, undiluted meaning. The emotion it generates, fear, is just a side effect, the heat coming off an engine. The engine itself is communication. It speaks in terror." He tapped a finger against the glass. "When it entered my mind, a mind with no fear for it to consume, it was like a broadcast hitting a silent receiver. I didn't just see it. I began to understand it, to read it. And I learned that its structure could be manipulated, replicated." He turned from the window and walked to the small metal toilet in the corner of his room. He reached into the basin, his hand disappearing into the water. When he pulled his hand out, he was holding something. It was a grief moth. It was identical to the one Tanaka had found on the memory chip, a perfect sculpture of solidified shadow. It rested on his palm, its dark wings seeming to absorb the light of the room. He held it up for her to see. "It's a word," Cray said, his eyes gleaming with a feverish, intellectual fire. "In its language, this is the symbol for loss. for emptiness. I can make them now, Doctor. I can write. The water is my paper, my consciousness is the ink. I am composing a symphony of beautiful, terrible things. Annalise stared, mesmerized and horrified. He was creating physical objects from nothing but water and his own mind, using the fragment of Karen he had absorbed as a conduit. "The moth I sent you, the message," she whispered. "A simple primer, a single character to let you know that our conversation was not over." He smiled again. "Valerius thinks he is in control. He is building a new cage, a stronger one. He doesn't realize the animal is no longer in the zoo. It is loose, inside the zookeeper's mind, and it is learning to pick locks." He closed his hand, and the moth sculpture dissolved into a puff of black dust that was instantly whisked away by the room's ventilation system. "He's going to use you, Doctor," Cray said, his tone turning serious. "He's going to force you to build that new cage. And when you do, he will put me inside it. He wants to study me. He wants to learn how to do what I can do. But he is a clumsy man trying to read poetry by smashing the letters with a hammer." "What do you want from me?" Annalise asked. "I want a collaborator," Cray said simply. "An editor. You understand the science. I understand the art. Together we can do more than write single words. We can write novels. We can build worlds." "Time up, Doctor." Valerius's voice cut in, sharp and final. The guard stepped forward. Annalise stared at Cray, her mind reeling. He was offering her an alliance, a monstrous, unthinkable partnership. But it was also the only path she could see that might lead to understanding and perhaps controlling the nightmare they had unleashed. As the guards escorted her away, Cray called after her. "When they finish the new machine, Doctor, they will want to test it. They will need a target, a mind outside this facility to prove their weapon works. Think about that. Think about who they might choose." He paused, letting the implication sink in. "Perhaps a certain former colleague of yours who has been asking too many questions about this facility. A Dr. Sophia Allende, I believe." Annalise froze. Sophia, her friend, her former second-in-command at the Institute, the only person on the outside she had trusted. Cray didn't just have a new power. He had access to information. Information he should not have. The zookeeper's mind was more compromised than she could have ever imagined. Chapter 7, Mark II. The next month was a blur of calculated compliance. Annalise ended her hunger strike. She ate the food, regained her strength, and bent her will to the task Valerius set before her. She was playing a long, dangerous game. Cray's warning had lit a fire under her. Sophia was her only real friend, a brilliant and stubborn woman who would not let the Institute's shutdown go unquestioned. If Valerius saw her as a threat, she would become a target. Annalise had to get ahead of it. She had to understand the new system well enough to sabotage it. She was given a new lab, a smaller, isolated annex connected to the main pit. Under the watchful eye of Major Reed, she worked with Tanaka to design the Mark II Dreamweaver. Tanaka, for all his amoral brilliance, was a man running on fear. The system failure had shaken him to his core. He was now obsessed with safety protocols, with redundancies, with fail-safes. Annalise exploited this, guiding his designs. "The core needs to be decentralized," she argued. sketching on a transparent data screen. A single, monolithic processor is too vulnerable to a feedback loop. We need a neural network, a distributed system where each node is independently firewalled. If one part of the system is compromised, the others can sever the connection instantly. Like a ship with watertight compartments, Tanaka mused, his fingers flying across his own screen, translating her concept into schematics. Isolatable. I like it. And the disconnect can't be software-based, she continued. It has to be physical. A series of explosive bolts that can sever the fiber optic lines completely. A dead man's switch that a technician in a separate, shielded bunker can trigger. Reed, observing from the corner, nodded in approval. The colonel will appreciate the focus on security, Doctor. He does not like surprises. Annalise was building the cage just as Cray had predicted, but she was also building in secret backdoors. She embedded a recursive algorithm deep in the core programming, a tiny string of code that looked like a diagnostic tool. But if activated by a specific voice command, a line from a poem she and Sophia used to joke about, it would not just disconnect the system. It would broadcast a massive burst of raw data, a record of everything Project Chimera had done, to a hidden satellite uplink. It was her insurance policy, her ghost in the machine. Meanwhile, Valerius's focus was entirely on Subject Scythe. He had a team of psychologists and linguists analyzing the recording of Annalise's conversation with Cray. He had them studying the dust from the dissolved moth sculpture. He was obsessed with understanding the language of terror. He visited Cray's chamber daily, trying to engage him, to provoke another demonstration of his power. But Cray was silent. He sat in his room, calm and serene. He refused to speak to anyone but Annalise. He was starving Valerius of the one thing he craved, data. It was a power play, and it was working. Valerius's frustration grew with each passing day. One evening, Major Reed entered Annalise's lab. She held a tablet. "The colonel requires your analysis of this," she said, her tone clipped. She handed the tablet to Annalise. It showed a live security feed from inside Cray's chamber. He was sitting on the floor, surrounded by dozens of grief moths. He was not just making them anymore. He was arranging them. He was laying them out on the concrete floor in complex geometric patterns, like a sand painter creating a mandala. "He's been doing this for 12 hours straight," Reed said. "The linguists are baffled. They think it's a form of nonlinear syntax. What do you see, Doctor?" Annalise looked at the swirling patterns of black moths. They were not words. They were schematics. She recognized the shapes. She was looking at a perfect, three-dimensional blueprint of the Mark II's decentralized core processor, the very system she and Tanaka were designing. How she breathed. "That's what the colonel wants to know," Reed said, her eyes narrowed. "There is no audio or visual surveillance in your lab, no way for him to see what you're building. So how does he know?" Annalise's mind raced. The ventilation system, a compromised guard. No, it was something more fundamental. "He's not seeing it, Major. He's reading it. He's reading the project's intent. He's connected to this place, to the people in it, on a level we can't comprehend. He's pulling the design straight from Tanaka's mind, or mine." The implication was staggering. Cray's psychic reach was no longer confined to the dream world. It was bleeding out into reality. Reed took the tablet back, her expression grim. The colonel will not be pleased. 2 weeks later, the Mark II was finished. It was a marvel of paranoid engineering. The central pit was now ringed with smaller, shielded substations. The primary console was housed in a separate room, behind a 2-foot-thick wall of lead-lined concrete. It was a fortress designed to contain a god. Valerius gathered the senior staff in the new control room. Analyze, Tanaka, and Reed stood before the main console. On the central screen was a dossier. It was a picture of a woman with warm, intelligent eyes and a stubborn set to her jaw. Dr. Sophia Allende. "The time has come for a field test," Valerius announced, his voice cool and steady. "Dr. Allende has for the past month been making inquiries. She has contacted journalists. She has filed freedom of information requests. She is becoming a nuisance." Analyze's blood turned to ice. It was happening. "She suffers from chronic insomnia, a side effect of her dedication to her work," Valerius continued, a cold smile touching his lips. "She frequently drifts into light, unstable REM sleep while working late in her home office, a perfect window of opportunity. Tonight we are going to reach out and touch her. A simple test. We will introduce a low-level Karen manifestation into her dreamscape. We will not be aiming for a kill. We will be aiming for a message, a warning to cease her inquiries." He turned to Analyze. "Doctor, you will pilot the session. You know the system better than anyone." "No," Analyze said, the word catching in her throat. Valerius's eyes hardened. That was not a request. "You can't do this," she pleaded, her voice shaking. "She's a civilian. She's my friend." "She is a security risk," Valerius corrected. "And friendship is a luxury we cannot afford. You will do as you are told, or Major Reed will conduct the test, and I assure you her touch will be far less gentle than yours." He leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper. "And if you refuse, we will move on to a secondary target, perhaps your elderly parents in Ohio. I hear your father's heart isn't what it used to be. A sudden shock could be unfortunate." The threat, brutal and direct, shattered the last of her resistance. He had her. He had her completely. She looked at the picture of Sophia on the screen, her friend's trusting smile a knife in her heart. She had no choice. She had to pilot the session. But as she sat at the console, her hands trembling, she knew one thing for certain. She would not be aiming for Sophia. She would be activating her ghost in the machine. She would burn Project Chimera to the ground, even if it meant taking herself with it. The only question was whether she could do it before the monster they were about to unleash on her friend did irreparable harm. Chapter 8: The First Target. The control room for the Mark II was silent, cold, and smelled of new electronics. Analyze sat at the console, a prisoner in the pilot's seat. Valerius stood behind her, a silent monolith of command. Reed was at a secondary station, monitoring facility security. Tanaka, looking pale and sweating despite the chill, manned the engineering board, his eyes darting between dozens of glowing green status indicators. "Satellite link established," a technician's voice announced from another station. "We are tracking Dr. Allen's biometrics via a remote sensor array. It's a clean signal. Analyze knew what that meant. A Black Ops team had been to Sophia's house. They had planted microscopic sensors, listening devices, things Sophia would never find. The violation made her feel sick. She's entering a REM phase, the technician continued. It's unstable, but it's a window. Dr. Sachs, Valerius said. His voice was calm, but it held the unbending certainty of a falling guillotine. You have the target. Subject Scythe is prepped and linked as the amplification source. On your mark. Analyze looked at the screen showing Dominic Cray in Chamber 2. He was lying on his bed, the silver circlet of the Mark II on his head. He was not sedated. He was awake, his eyes open, and he was staring directly into the security camera. He smiled, a slow, deliberate expression, as if he knew he was the engine for this terrible weapon. He was not just the power source, he was a willing participant. She took a shaky breath and placed her hands on the controls. They felt alien, the smooth, cool metal an instrument of torture. Her plan was simple and suicidal. She would initiate the dream link. She would establish the connection to Sophia's mind. And then, at the critical moment, she would speak the activation phrase for her backdoor program. The system would broadcast all of its data to the world, and the explosive bolts would sever the connection. It would be chaos. Valerius might even shoot her on the spot, but Sophia would be safe, and the project would be exposed. Establishing connection, Analyze said, her voice a dry crackle. She worked the controls, her movements precise. She was a surgeon preparing for an amputation. The main screen flickered to life, showing Sophia's dreamscape. It was her home office. Books lined the walls, papers were stacked neatly on her desk, and through the window a gentle rain was falling on a dark garden. It was a peaceful, familiar scene. Analyze's heart ached. Connection stable, Tanaka reported, his voice tight. The decentralized core is holding. No feedback from the amplification source yet. Now, Doctor, Valerius commanded, introduce the resonance. Analyze hesitated. This was the point of no return. She had to create the psychic chum, the tiny seed of fear that Karen would latch onto. She gently turned a dial. In Sophia's dream, the rain outside the window began to fall harder. A flash of lightning illuminated the garden, and for a split second, the shadow of a tall, thin man was visible standing among the trees. Resonance established, Analyze confirmed, her throat tight. Karen's signature detected its, different this time, stronger, more focused. That is Subject Scythe's influence, Valerius said, a note of triumph in his voice. He is not just an amplifier, he is a lens. He is focusing the entity. Proceed. Analyze's hand hovered over the comm switch. She had to time it perfectly. She needed the link to be at its peak to ensure her backdoor program had enough bandwidth to transmit the data. She watched the energy graphs, waiting for the spike. On the screen, the shadow in the garden was gone. The front door of Sophia's dream house creaked open. Sophia's perspective turned toward the sound. A trail of wet, muddy footprints led from the door into the house. Sophia's heart rate is increasing, the biotech reported. Hold steady, Analyze whispered to herself. Not yet, just a few more seconds. The dream camera panned down the hallway. At the far end, in the deep shadows, a figure stood. It was Karen, but it was different now, sharper. Its form was less like a shadow and more like a man carved from obsidian. Its featureless face seemed to hold a new, intelligent malice. This was Karen, filtered through the consciousness of Dominic Cray. The entity took a step forward. Annalise flipped the comm switch. She took a deep breath to speak the activation phrase. And then everything went wrong. Before she could utter a word, a new voice filled the control room, piped through the main speakers. It was Cray's voice, but it was not coming from his room. It was coming from inside the system. "A lovely home," Cray's voice said, dripping with condescending amusement. "Quaint, but the security is atrocious." On the main screen, Karen stopped. It tilted its head. And then it spoke, not with a voice but with a symbol. A grief moth, black and perfect, materialized in the air in front of it. Valerius stared, his eyes wide. What is this? He's communicating through the entity. Annalise's blood ran cold. The moth was not for Sophia, it was for her. It was the word for loss, a warning. "Did you really think I wouldn't know, Doctor?" Cray's voice continued, a silken thread of menace. "Did you think I couldn't read your heroic little plan in the back of your mind? Your ghost in the machine. It's a clever bit of code, but I had a look at it, and I made a few improvements." A new window opened on Annalise's console. It was a string of code, her backdoor program, but it had been twisted, rewritten. The destination for the data burst was no longer a public satellite. It was a secure military server, General Maddox's private server, and the data being sent was not the truth of Project Chimera. It was a carefully edited log that framed Annalise as a saboteur and a traitor, selling secrets to a foreign power with Sophia Allende as her accomplice. He hadn't just read her plan. He had weaponized it against her. "Checkmate, Doctor," Cray's voice whispered. Annalise stared in horror. She couldn't trigger the program now. It would be her own death warrant, and Sophia. She was trapped. "What is he talking about, Doctor?" Valerius demanded, his voice dangerously low. Before she could answer, the scene in Sophia's dream changed again. Karen raised its hand, and from its fingertips it did not project fear. It projected knowledge. A stream of raw data flowed from the entity into Sophia's dreamscape. Classified documents, blueprints for the Dreamweaver, names of the personnel at the Sand Spear facility. He wasn't trying to scare Sophia. He was showing her everything. He was turning her into a witness who knew too much to be allowed to live. "What is he doing?" Reed shouted. "He's tainting the target," Annalise realized, her voice filled with despair. "He's making her a legitimate security threat. He's forcing Valerius's hand." On the screen, Sophia's dream self screamed, not in terror, but in confusion and pain as the flood of impossible knowledge poured into her mind. "BP critical, she's having a seizure," the biotech yelled. "Colonel, we have to pull back," Annalise pleaded. "He's out of control." Valerius looked from the screaming, convulsing dream figure of Sophia to the serene, smiling face of Dominic Cray on the other monitor. He understood. Cray had played them all. He had used their weapon to create an uncontainable information breach. He has made her an unacceptable liability, Valerius said, his voice cold as the grave. He turned to analyze. The test parameters have changed, Doctor. This is no longer a warning. It is an elimination. Terminate the target. Analyze stared at him, her mind refusing to process the words. That is an order, Doctor, Valerius snarled. Fry her brain now, or I will have Major Reed do it. This was Cray's endgame. To force her into an impossible choice, murder her best friend or stand by and watch someone else do it. Either way, Sophia died, and a part of Annalise Sachs would die with her. Chapter 9: The Stain. The choice was not a choice. It was a razor blade held to her throat. Annalise stared at the console, at the image of her friend's mind being torn apart. Sophia's dreamscape was fracturing, the neat office dissolving into a maelstrom of geometric patterns and classified documents. Her physical body, miles away, was convulsing. The biotech was shouting numbers that no longer meant anything. Doctor, Valerius's voice was a physical blow. I will not give the order again. Annalise's hands moved, seemingly of their own accord. Her fingers flew across the console, not toward the controls that would overload the connection, but to the core modulators. She couldn't kill Sophia, but she couldn't let Reed do it either. There was only one other path, a desperate, insane gamble. She wasn't going to terminate the target. She was going to steal it. I'm rerouting the primary energy feed from the amplification source, she announced, her voice a cold, flat monotone that betrayed none of the screaming panic in her soul. I'm going to use Cray's own power to create a feedback pulse and sever the connection at the source. It was a plausible lie, a complex technical maneuver that sounded like a failsafe. Tanaka's eyes widened. Doctor, the power spike could destabilize our core. It's the only way to cut him off clean, she retorted. She bypassed the safeties Tanaka had so painstakingly built. Red warnings flashed across her screen which she ignored. She wasn't creating a feedback pulse. She was opening a direct, unshielded conduit, a psychic pipeline, but she wasn't pointing it at Sophia. She was pointing it at herself. She slammed her hand down on the execute key. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the universe broke. A wave of pure, raw energy, amplified and focused by Cray's malevolent consciousness, surged back through the system. But instead of dissipating or frying the target, it followed the new path Annalise had created. It shot directly into her own console, bypassed the physical hardware and slammed into her mind. The world dissolved. The control room, the alarms, Valerius's enraged shout, it all vanished. She was untethered, thrown into a screaming void of pure data. It was the static sea, the space between minds. She felt the searing heat of Cray's psyche, the icy void of Karen's presence, and the terrified, fracturing consciousness of Sophia. She reached out with her mind, a desperate grabbing motion. Sophia. She felt a flicker of recognition, a tiny spark in the overwhelming darkness. She grabbed onto it, holding it tight. And then she pulled. She pulled with all of her strength, using the last vestiges of her own identity as an anchor. She was pulling Sophia's consciousness away from Karen, away from Cray, and tucking it into the only safe place she could find, inside her own mind. The control room slammed back into reality. Annalise was thrown from her chair by the force of the psychic recoil. She landed hard on the floor, her head cracking against the metal base of a console. The world was a blur of spinning red lights and shouting voices. A metallic taste filled her mouth. The main screen was dead. The link was broken. "What happened?" Reed was yelling. "What did she do?" She absorbed the feedback loop," Tanaka stammered, his face ashen. "All of it. It should have killed her. It should have vaporized her brain." Annalise pushed herself up, her vision swimming. Valerius was standing over her, his face a mask of cold fury, his sidearm drawn and aimed at her head. "Report on the target," Valerius demanded into his comm. A moment of static, then the biotech's voice, shaky and filled with disbelief. "Colonel, Dr. Allen's vitals are normalizing. The seizure has stopped. She's fallen into a deep, natural sleep. She's stable." "And the subject?" "Subject Scythe is laughing, sir." Annalise looked past Valerius to the monitor showing Cray's room. He was leaning back on his bed, his head tilted toward the ceiling, laughing a silent, joyous laugh. He knew exactly what she had done. She had saved Sophia's life. But in doing so, she had performed an act of psychic integration that made Cray's own feat look like a parlor trick. She had torn her friend's consciousness from her body and absorbed it. A new voice whispered in the back of her mind. It was faint, terrified, and confused. "Annalise, where am I? What's happening?" It was Sophia's voice, inside her head. Annalise slowly got to her feet, swaying. She looked at Valerius's gun, at Reed's shocked face, at Tanaka's terror. They thought they were in a room with a rogue scientist. They had no idea. They were in a room with a woman who was now two people. "You have failed, Doctor," Valerius snarled, the barrel of his gun unwavering. "You have defied a direct order, destroyed my field test, and compromised this project beyond measure." Annalise met his gaze. The fear was gone, replaced by something cold and hard. She was no longer just a scientist. She was a vessel, a sanctuary, and a weapon. "You're wrong, Colonel," she said, and she was shocked to hear the faint, disembodied echo of Sophia's voice layered over her own. "The project isn't compromised. It has just entered a new phase." She could feel the stain of Karen inside her, a tiny shard of the darkness she'd pulled away from Sophia. It was cold, but it was not empty. It was full of potential, full of power. Cray thought he was the only one who could speak the new language. He was about to get a competitor. Chapter 10, Two in the Head. The week following the disastrous field test was a Cold War fought in sterile silence. Valerius did not have Annalise shot. He did not lock her away. He did something far worse. He put her under absolute 24/7 observation. She was moved to a new set of quarters, a medical suite with a one-way mirror where a team of technicians watched her every move. They monitored her brain waves, her heart rate, her sleep cycles. They were treating her not as a person, but as a living, breathing anomaly to be studied. She was the new subject zero. The voice in her head, Sophia's voice, grew stronger each day. At first, it was a terrified whisper, a phantom echo of her friend's consciousness. Analyze, I'm scared. I can see what you see. I feel disconnected. Analyze learned to communicate back, not with her voice, but with her thoughts. It was clumsy at first, like flexing a muscle she never knew she had. She would focus on a memory, a feeling, a string of words. It's okay, Sophia, I'm here. I pulled you out, you're safe. They existed in a shared mental space, a strange hybrid of Analyze's mind and the dream of an office where Sophia's consciousness had taken refuge. It was their private sanctuary, a place the monitors and sensors could not penetrate. In that shared space, Analyze explained everything. Project Chimera, Karen, Cray, the field test. Sophia's terror slowly gave way to a horrified understanding, then to the same stubborn, intellectual fury that had made her such a brilliant researcher. He used us. That son of a bitch used us all as lab rats, Sophia's thought voice seethed. The entity, Cray, the military. It's a three-way collision, and we're caught in the middle. We're more than that, Analyze projected back. When I pulled you out, I pulled a piece of the other thing with us, a fragment of the Karen entity. I can feel it. It's like a stain of cold ink on my soul. She could. It was a tiny, dormant shard of the void, nestled deep within her subconscious. It was inert for now, but she knew it was there. She had her own piece of the monster. Her primary observer was Major Reed. The Major would sit in the observation room for hours, her face impassive, watching Analyze Reed eat or simply stare at the wall. Analyze knew Reed was not just a guard. She was an analyst. Valerius had tasked her with finding a weakness, a way to control his new, unpredictable asset. One afternoon, Reed entered the suite. She carried a tablet. The colonel has reviewed the data from the incident, Reed said, her voice devoid of inflection. He has a theory. He believes that by absorbing the feedback loop, you have created a stable quantum entanglement between your consciousness and Dr. Allende. He wants to test this theory. She placed the tablet on the table in front of Analyze. It showed a live feed of a hospital room. Analyze's breath caught. On the bed, a woman lay still, her eyes closed, hooked up to a ventilator. It was Sophia's body. After the incident, Dr. Allen's body did not wake up, Reed explained. It entered a persistent vegetative state. It is being maintained at a military medical facility. The colonel wants to see what happens to the vessel if we apply a stimulus to the passenger. Reed's thumb hovered over a button on the side of a tablet. This will administer a mild, non-lethal electrical shock to Dr. Allen's body. No, Sophia's voice screamed in Analyze's head, a wave of pure panic. Analyze felt a phantom jolt of pain, a shadow of the electricity shoot through her own body. She gasped, her hand flying to her arm. Reed watched her, her eyes sharp and analytical. Intriguing, a sympathetic physical response. The entanglement is stronger than we projected. This was Valerius's new weapon against her. He couldn't threaten her directly, so he would torture Sophia's empty body to control her. He's a monster, Sophia wept in their shared mind. He's a soldier, Analyze corrected, her own thoughts cold and hard. He sees a tool and he is finding the operating manual. We have to be smarter. Later that night, as Annalise lay on her bed pretending to sleep, she focused inward. She reached for the cold stain of Karen within her. She had been afraid of it, but now she knew it was her only weapon. Cray had learned to use his fragment to build, to write his terrible poetry. She needed to learn to use hers. "What are you doing?" Sophia asked, her thought voice laced with fear. "Fighting back." Annalise focused all of her will on the shard of darkness. She didn't try to control it, she simply listened to it. She let its nature, its purpose flow into her. It was not a being of malice. It was a being of transition, a ferryman just as Valerius had theorized. It carried things from one state to another, from life to death, from reality to dream, from order to chaos. Cray, a being of pure order, used it to impose his will on reality, creating his sculptures. But Annalise was a scientist, a being of observation. She could use it to see, to understand. She focused on the one-way mirror in her room. She pushed the entity's essence toward it, not as a force, but as a lens. The world wavered. The reflection in the mirror flickered. For a split second, it was no longer a mirror. It was a window. She could see the observation room beyond. She saw the two night shift technicians, one dozing in his chair, the other scrolling through his phone. She saw Major Reed's empty chair. She saw the duty roster pinned to the wall. Then the image shattered and the mirror was just a mirror again. Annalise gasped, a wave of vertigo washing over her. The effort had been immense. "Did you see that?" Sophia's voice was filled with awe. "I did," Annalise thought, a grim smile touching her lips. The zookeeper thinks he's watching the animal. He has no idea the animal is learning to watch him back. The game had changed. She was no longer just a prisoner. She and Sophia were a two-person intelligence agency trapped behind enemy lines. And Annalise was just beginning to understand the power of the ghost she carried inside her own head. They had a weapon. Now they needed a target. And their first target was Colonel Marcus Valerius himself. Chapter 11. The Valerius Gambit. The next 2 weeks were a covert education. By day, Annalise was the model prisoner, submitting to Valerius's endless tests. He and Reed would apply stimuli to Sophia's distant, sleeping body, changes in temperature, loud noises, specific drugs, and meticulously log Annalise's sympathetic reactions. She played her part, wincing at phantom pains and shivering in the warm room, all while carefully hiding the true extent of her new abilities. By night, she and Sophia worked. Annalise would lie perfectly still on her bed, feigning sleep, and push her consciousness toward the Karen fragment. It was no longer a cold stain. It felt like a muscle she was slowly, painfully learning to control. She used it as a lens, a psychic periscope. The mirror is too direct. They monitor its surface for energy fluctuations, she projected to Sophia, whose consciousness acted as a second set of eyes, a spotter in their shared mental space. But the vents, the electrical conduits, they are unshielded. They are pathways. She began to push her perception through the facility's infrastructure. It was disorienting, a non-visual, non-auditory form of seeing. She perceived the flow of electricity in the wires, the movement of air in the ducts, the subtle vibrations in the concrete walls. She was mapping the facility from the inside out. "I see him," Sophia's thought voice suddenly announced one night, sharp with alarm. Annalise focused her strange new sense in the direction of Sophia's gaze. She found Colonel Valerius. He was in his office long after the rest of the facility was quiet. He was not working. He sat in his chair in the dark, staring at a framed photograph on his desk. Annalise pushed her perception closer, through the electrical wiring of his desk lamp. The image resolved. It was a woman with a kind smile and warm eyes. His wife, Annalise realized. She remembered the rumor from the initial briefing. Valerius never dreamed. He was proud of it. But as she watched him, she felt a profound, aching sadness radiating from him. It was a psychic wound, walled off and buried deep, but it was there. A vulnerability. "He's not a machine," Sophia projected, her tone softened with a doctor's empathy. "He's a man in pain." "Pain is a weapon, Sophia. He taught me that," Annalise countered, her own thoughts sharp as ice. "He's about to get his lesson back." Her plan was audacious. Valerius was the command and control center of the entire project. If she could break him, even for a moment, she might be able to create enough chaos to find a way out. She was going to use the fragment not to see, but to transmit. She was going to force the man who never dreamed to have a nightmare. The opportunity came 3 nights later. Valerius was in his office again, deep in his nightly ritual of silent grief. From her cell, Annalise lay still, her breathing slow and even. "Are you sure about this, Annalise?" Sophia asked, her thought voice trembling. "This is different. This is an attack. He put a gun to my head and ordered me to murder you. This is a proportional response," Annalise replied, her resolve absolute. She gathered her will, focusing it on the Karen fragment. She did not use her own memories. She used Valerius's own pain as the source code. She reached out with her psychic sense, touching the profound grief radiating from him. She hooked into it, amplified it, and began to weave it into a construct. She took the image of the woman in the photograph, the quiet sadness of the office, the colonel's ironclad control, and she twisted it. In his dark office, Colonel Valerius blinked. The air grew cold. A faint scent of lavender, his wife's favorite, touched the air. He sat up straighter, his military discipline snapping into place. His hand went to the sidearm he never took off. A sound came from the corner of the room, a soft, gentle weeping. He stood, his chair scraping on the floor. He moved toward the sound, his weapon drawn. In the deepest shadow, a figure sat huddled on the floor. It was a woman in a simple white dress. Her shoulders shook with sobs. "Catherine," Valerius whispered, his voice cracking, the name an artifact from a life he had buried long ago. The woman looked up. It was his wife's face. The same kind eyes, the same gentle smile, but the smile was wrong. It was stretched too wide, a rictus of agony, and her eyes were empty, hollowed out, two black pits of absolute nothingness. "You let me die," the apparition whispered, its voice a discordant harmony of his wife's gentle tone and the static hiss of the Karen entity. "You were on a mission, always on a mission. You weren't there." Valerius stared, his face pale, his knuckles white on the grip of his pistol. He did not see a ghost. His rational mind knew this was an illusion, a psychic attack, but it was built from his own trauma, tailored to his deepest wound. It was a weapon he had no defense against. The apparition stood, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a marionette with its strings cut. It glided toward him. "They can bring us back, you know," it hissed. "This facility. They can reach into the dark and pull us out, but you have to pay the price. You have to trade." It reached out a hand. "Let me in, Marcus. Let me into the machine. Let's be together again." In her cell, Annalise felt the strain. This was taking everything she had. Her nose began to bleed, a warm trickle of blood over her lip. "He's fighting it," Sophia projected. "His mental discipline is incredible." Valerius gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his scarred temple. He was fighting a war on two fronts, one against the phantom in his office, and another against the grief exploding in his own heart. The apparition was inches from him now, its empty eyes promising both reunion and damnation. "Get out of my head," he snarled. And he fired. The gunshot was a deafening roar in the silent facility. The bullet passed straight through the apparition, leaving a hole that swirled with black static and slammed into the concrete wall behind it. The phantom flickered, its form destabilizing. Valerius fired again, and again, the room filled with the cordite stench of gunfire. Alarms blared across the facility. Doors slammed open down the hall. Annalise heard Sergeant Cobb's voice shouting orders. She had done it. She had cracked his composure. The illusion of his wife dissolved into a cloud of black, ashen moths that fluttered once before vanishing. Valerius stood alone in his office, gun smoking, staring at the empty space where his deepest regret had just tried to bargain with him. Reed and Cobb were the first to burst into the room. They found their commander, the Iron Man of Project Chimera, breathing heavily, his weapon shaking in his hand, empty shell casings littering the floor around him. He looked at them, and for the first time since Annalise had met him, his pale blue eyes were filled with something other than command. They were filled with raw, naked terror. The gambit had worked. She had proven that no one in this facility was safe, not even its king, and she had done it without anyone knowing she was the one who pulled the trigger. The secret war had just escalated dramatically. Chapter 12: The Second Player. The fallout from Valerius's psychotic break, as it was officially logged, was immediate and seismic. The colonel was placed on mandatory medical leave and confined to his quarters, a quiet coup orchestrated by Major Reed under the advisement of the facility's chief medical officer. With a single, invisible attack, Annalise had decapitated Project Chimera. Major Evelyn Reed was now in command. Annalise had expected this to be an improvement. She was wrong. Valerius was a monster of ambition, but he was a predictable monster. Reed was an enigma. Her face was a perfect mask of military efficiency. Where Valerius was fire, Reed was ice. Her first act as commander was to double the psychic shielding around the entire facility. Sheets of lead-impregnated polymers were installed. Low-frequency psychic dampeners, experimental tech from another black site, were activated. The air in the facility grew heavy, sluggish. For Annalise, it was like trying to breathe through water. Her seeing ability was severely hampered. "She's cutting us off," Annalise projected to Sophia, a headache blooming behind her eyes from the effort of piercing the new defenses. "She's not just reinforcing the cage, she's soundproofing it." Reed's second act was even more alarming. She came to Annalise's suite, not with a tablet or a threat, but with a chessboard. She set it up on the small table between them. "The Colonel underestimated you," Reed said, her voice as cool and polished as the marble chess pieces. She placed a white pawn forward. "He saw you as a tool, a broken component to be repaired and reused. He was wrong. You are a player, the second player in this game." "I don't know what you're talking about," Annalise replied, her guard up. Reed smiled, a rare and unsettling sight. It did not reach her eyes. "Please, doctor, let's be done with the pretense." There was no psychic residue in the Colonel's office after his episode. No energy signature. No trace of an external attack. It was a perfect crime. Only a fool would believe it was a random breakdown. And I am not a fool. She gestured to the board. "The first player is Dominic Cray. He is chaos. He wishes to burn the board and everyone with it. You are different. You are order. You want to control the game, to win, and to escape." Annalise stared at the board, her heart pounding. Reed knew. She didn't have proof, but she knew. "She's testing you," Sophia whispered in her mind. "Be careful." "Your move, doctor," Reed said. Annalise slowly reached out and pushed a black pawn forward, mirroring Reed's move. A silent acknowledgement, an acceptance of terms. "Cray is a problem," Reed continued, her eyes fixed on the board. "His influence is growing. 2 days ago, a guard on his rotation, a man with a perfect service record, attempted to breach the chamber. He claimed Cray spoke to him in his blood. We have him in isolation. Cray is turning this facility into his own personal cult." She moved a knight, its horse head rearing aggressively. Valerius's strategy was to study Cray, to learn from him. This was a mistake. One does not learn from a wildfire. One contains it, or one extinguishes it. "What do you want from me, Major?" Annalise asked. Reed looked up from the board, her gaze sharp and intense. "I want you to help me kill him." The words hung in the air, cold and heavy. "It's a trap," Sophia screamed in her head. "You want me to use my ability to attack him?" Annalise asked, feigning confusion. "The way you think I attacked the Colonel?" "No," Reed said, shaking her head. "A psychic attack is useless. His mind is a fortress. It would be like throwing pebbles at a battleship. I need something more direct. I need you to go back into the machine." She leaned forward. "The Mark II is operational. Tanaka has been working around the clock. We are going to put you into the system. And we are going to put Cray into the system. You will enter his dreamscape, his red labyrinth. And while you have him distracted in his own mind, a team of my operators will breach his chamber in the physical world and terminate him with extreme prejudice." "You want me to be a diversion," Annalise said. "A piece of bait." "You would be the most dangerous piece of bait in history," Reed corrected. In his mind, you are his equal, his rival. He will not be able to resist engaging you. It will be the ultimate game for him. While he is playing chess with you in his head, my men will be checkmating him in reality. The plan was brutal, efficient, and terrifying. It would mean willingly diving back into the nightmare, facing Cray on his home turf. But it was also a chance to eliminate the most chaotic element in the facility, a chance to earn Reed's trust, and a chance to be inside the Mark II again, where her ghost in the machine was still waiting. Don't do it, Analyze, Sophia pleaded. His mind, the labyrinth, you saw what it did to Karen, it could destroy you. Analyze looked at Reed. She saw a woman willing to do anything to regain control, a woman who saw the world as a series of tactical problems requiring tactical solutions. In that, they were alike. And what do I get in return? Analyze asked. If you succeed, Reed said, her voice dropping to a low promise, I will personally escort you and Dr. Allen's body to a neutral country of your choice, with a new identity and enough funding to disappear forever. I will erase Project Chimera from your life. Freedom. It was the one thing she wanted more than anything. You have my word, Doctor, Reed said. She knocked over her own king on the chessboard, surrendering the game. As a fellow player. Analyze looked at the toppled king, then at the unwavering certainty in Major Reed's eyes. She was being offered a deal with the devil, but in the Sand Spear facility, the devil was the only one offering a way out. Chapter 13. The Red Labyrinth Revisited. The pit was cold and silent. The Mark II system hummed with contained power, a sleeping dragon. Analyze sat in the pilot's chair, the familiar silver circlet cool against her temples. This time, however, she was not the pilot. She was the passenger. Tanaka, his face a mask of nervous tension, manned the primary console. Major Reed stood behind him, her arms crossed. On a side monitor, a split screen showed a live feed of Dominic Cray's chamber and a tactical team of 4 operators, clad in black and armed with suppressed rifles, waiting outside his door. They were Sergeant Cobb's best men. Dr. Sachs, are you ready? Reed's voice was crisp in her headset. Analyze took a deep breath. Sophia was a silent, terrified presence in the back of her mind. I'm here, was all she could project. Ready, Analyze said. Subject Scythe is linked and sedated, Tanaka reported. Though sedated is a relative term, his mind is fighting it as usual. We're not aiming for unconsciousness, Reed said. We just need him dreaming. Initiate the link. Tanaka's fingers danced across the console. The world dissolved. The familiar, sickening lurch of dream entry pulled at Analyze. The screaming void of the static sea rushed past her, and then she was standing on polished, black obsidian. She was back in the red labyrinth. The air was thick with the scent of old blood. The crimson stone walls pulsed with a faint, inner light, illuminating the gruesome, carved murals of Cray's crimes. It was exactly as she remembered it. A figure emerged from the shadows down one of the corridors. It was Dominic Cray, not his physical self but his dream avatar, calm, confident, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit. He looked at her, and a real, genuine smile of delight spread across his face. "Doctor," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the maze, "I knew you would come back. I have been so dreadfully bored. The new management is uninspired." Annalise stood her ground, her heart hammering. She could feel the Karen fragment within her, a cold point of power. "Stay calm," she told herself. "He wants a game, give him one." "The game is over, Cray," she said, her voice steady. He chuckled. "My dear doctor, the game has just begun." He gestured to the labyrinth around them. "I have made some renovations. I do hope you like them." The walls of the maze began to shift. The carved murals of his past victims dissolved, replaced by new ones. She saw a carving of Clay Ogden, Subject Zero, strapped to a medical bed, his face a mask of terror. She saw a perfect, detailed sculpture of Colonel Valerius firing a pistol into the darkness of his office. She saw a carving of Major Reed, her face cold and impassive, moving chess pieces. "You see everything," Annalise whispered. "This place is a part of me, Doctor, and I am a part of this place. The Sand Spear facility is my body now. I feel every secret, every whisper. I saw your little deal with the Major." He shook his head, a look of mock disappointment on his face. "I thought you were more creative than that. A simple assassination, so crude." He began to walk toward her, his footsteps silent on the obsidian floor. "But I will play along, for you. Let's have a battle of wits, a battle of wills." As he got closer, she could feel the immense psychic pressure of his mind, a crushing weight. He was a god in this domain. She was a tourist. "Annalise, get out," Sophia screamed in her mind. "It's a trap, he knows about the team." Annalise ignored her. She focused on the Karen fragment, drawing on its power. The air around her grew cold. A single, perfect grief moth materialized from her hand, its ashen wings beating silently. It was the symbol for loss. Cray stopped, his eyes widening in appreciation. "Exquisite. You have been practicing. You speak the language. A single word, but the grammar is perfect." He raised his own hand. A dozen moths, each one blacker and more detailed than hers, swarmed from his fingertips. They were not just symbols for loss. They were nuanced. Regret, despair, annihilation. He was a poet. She had just learned the alphabet. "Your move, Doctor," he purred. In the control room, Reed watched the energy readings spike. "What's happening?" "They're communicating," Tanaka stammered. "But not with words, with pure symbolic data. The system can barely process it. It's like watching two supercomputers argue in a language we can't understand." "How much time does the tactical team have?" Reed asked. "As long as she can hold his attention." Back in the labyrinth, Cray was weaving his moths into complex patterns, creating sentences of pure terror that hung in the air. Annalise fought back, using her single word as a shield, a constant declaration of loss that negated his more complex threats. It was exhausting. The psychic strain was immense. "He's too strong," Sophia cried. "He's going to overwhelm you." "I don't have to beat him," Annalise projected back, gritting her mental teeth. "I just have to hold him here." "This is delightful," Cray said, his smile widening. "But it is a stalemate. Allow me to change the rules." The labyrinth around them dissolved. Annalise found herself standing in a perfect replica of her old office at the North California Sleep Institute. Sunlight streamed through the windows. A cup of her favorite tea sat steaming on the desk. And sitting in her chair, looking at her with confusion, was Sophia Allende, her friend's true self, pulled from the sanctuary of Annalise's mind. Annalise, Sophia's dream self asked, "What's going on?" Annalise stared in horror. Cray hadn't just entered her mind. He had reached in and pulled Sophia out, placing her between them. He had taken her hostage. Cray appeared by the door, his expression one of calm, sadistic triumph. "The problem with your power, Doctor, is that it comes with a conscience. You have a weakness, her." He flicked his wrist. A single black grief moth flew from his hand and landed on Sophia's shoulder. Sophia gasped, her face paling, a look of profound, soul-crushing despair washing over her. "Every second you fight me," Cray said softly, "I will feed her another piece of oblivion. By the time I am done, there will be nothing left of your friend but a hollow shell. Now, shall we continue our game?" In the control room, Reed watched Annalise's biometrics go haywire. "What the hell is he doing to her?" "I don't know," Tanaka yelled. "The psychic feedback is off the charts. It's like he's attacking two minds at once." Reed gritted her teeth. She looked at the tactical feed. Cobb's team was in position. "To hell with this. Cobb, go, breach and terminate now." "Copy that, Major." Sergeant Cobb's voice came over the comm. The tactical team planted a charge on Cray's door. The charge blew. They stormed the room and found it completely empty. The bed was made. The room was sterile. Dominic Cray was gone. "Major," Cobb's voice was frantic. "The subject is not in the chamber. I repeat, the subject is gone." In the labyrinth, Cray's smile became a triumphant, terrifying grin. He looked at Annalise. "A checkmate," he whispered. The world went white. Chapter 14. The Empty Cage. The link severed with the force of a physical explosion. Annalise was thrown back into her own consciousness, the psychic shriek of Cray's victory echoing in her skull. She ripped the circlet from her head and gasped for air, the cold reality of the pit rushing back in. "He's gone. The subject is gone." Sergeant Cobb's frantic voice was still crackling over the speakers. Major Reed stood frozen for a single, stunned second. Her mask of control was shattered. Then her training kicked in. She slammed a large red button on the wall. "Facility-wide lockdown. Code Black. Seal all sectors. No one moves. I want every square inch of this facility searched." Alarms blared. The same rotating red lights from the Mark I's destruction, bathing the room in a panicked glow. Annalise's mind was racing, trying to process the impossible. How could Cray have escaped a locked room in the most secure part of the facility? "He didn't escape," Sophia's voice whispered in her head. The voice was weak, trembling, stained with the despair of Cray's attack. "He dissolved. When the connection broke, I saw him. He turned into moths, black moths, and just blew away." It was insane. He had used the dream link, the immense power of the Mark II, not to escape, but to transform. To translate his physical body into the same symbolic language he used in the dreamscape. He had learned to write himself into reality. Tanaka, Reed's voice was sharp as broken glass. Give me a location. The link must have left a residual energy signature. Where did he go? Tanaka's fingers were a blur on the console, his face sheet white with terror. I don't know. The energy signature didn't move to another part of the facility. It just vanished from the system. It's nowhere. That's not possible. It is, Annalise said, her voice hoarse. She pushed herself to her feet. He's not in the facility anymore. He is the facility. He's in the walls, in the wiring, in the plumbing. He's a ghost in his own machine. Reed stared at her, her mind refusing to accept the tactical impossibility of it all. Explain. He used the energy of the Mark II to deconstruct his physical form, Annalise said, the horrifying truth taking shape even as she spoke it. He's pure data now, pure consciousness. Fused with the infrastructure of this building, he can be anywhere, everywhere. As if on cue, the lights in the pit flickered. The main screen, which had been showing a schematic of the facility, suddenly changed. A single sentence appeared, typed in the same clean font as the note he had sent her. The board is mine now. The technicians screamed. One of them pointed a trembling finger at a ventilation grate. A stream of black dust like iron filings was pouring from the vent. It coalesced on the floor, forming a writhing, shifting pile. The pile rose, taking a form. It was a man made of pure, swirling shadow and data, a hush puppet but larger, more defined. It had no face, but it turned its head toward the terrified technicians. Open fire, Reed yelled, drawing her sidearm. The guards in the room raised their rifles. They fired, their bullets passing through the creature with no effect. The Shadow Man lunged, not at the guards, but at the main console of the Mark II. It plunged its hands into the machine. The system screamed. Not an alarm, but a sound of pure electronic agony. The lights flickered wildly. On the screens, the code that ran the facility's life support, security, and power grids began to rewrite itself at an impossible speed. He's seizing control of the entire facility, Tanaka shrieked, backing away from the console. He's locking us out. He's locking us in. The heavy blast doors to the pit slammed shut with a deafening clang of finality. They were trapped. The shadow creature pulled its hands from the console and dissolved back into a cloud of dust, which was sucked back into the vent. Silence fell. The alarm stopped. The emergency lights died, replaced by the normal, steady, humming fluorescence. But the silence was different. It was heavy, watchful, malevolent. The facility was no longer a neutral environment. It was the body of a monster, and they were all trapped inside it. Reed stood in the center of the room, her face pale, her gun still raised. Her plan, her control, her entire worldview had been dismantled in less than 5 minutes. Major, Sergeant Cobb's voice came over her personal comm, tinny and distant. We're locked out of the command center. All internal comms are down except for this channel. What are your orders? Reed looked at the sealed blast door. She looked at the terrified faces of her technicians. Her gaze finally fell on Annalise. In that moment, she was no longer a commander or a jailer. She was just another prisoner. Dr. Sachs, Reed said, her voice barely a whisper. What have we done? Analyze, Sophia's voice said, a tiny spark of defiance in the darkness of their shared mind. He may control the building, but he doesn't control us. The Karen fragment. It's not connected to his system. It's a part of us. We're the one piece of this place that he doesn't own. Analyze met Reed's desperate gaze. For the first time, she felt a sliver of hope. Cray had made a mistake. In his arrogant, triumphant move to seize the entire facility, he had overlooked one small detail. He had locked them all in the cage with him, but he had also locked in the one person who could fight him on his own terms. The second player was still in the game. Chapter 15. The Ghost in the Walls. The first hour of Cray's reign was a masterclass in psychological warfare. He did not attack them directly. He toyed with them. The lights would flicker in time with a person's anxious heartbeat. The temperature would drop 20 degrees in an instant, then return to normal. Whispers would echo from empty corridors, speaking the deepest, most private fears of the trapped personnel. It was Cray, flexing his new muscles, turning the entire facility into a haunted house of his own design. Reed, Analyze, Tanaka, and the handful of guards and technicians were trapped in the pit. They were the command center, and Cray had cut them off from the rest of the facility, where dozens of other personnel were now isolated in their own sectors. He's treating this like a game, Reed said, her voice regaining its sharp, tactical edge. She was packing the room, mapping it out, assessing her resources. He's isolating the command structure from the body of the force. Standard insurgency tactics. He's not an insurgent, he's a goddamn poltergeist. A young guard stammered, his eyes darting toward every shadow. He has a body, Analyze countered, thinking aloud. It's not flesh and blood, but it exists. The facility's network. The power grid, the HVAC, the data lines. That is his circulatory system. If we can sever it, we can wound him. The main generator is in the sub-level, Tanaka said, pulling up a schematic on a battery-powered tablet. The only piece of tech Cray didn't seem to control. It's powered by a small geothermal tap, completely self-contained. If we can get to it and shut it down, we could black out the entire facility. Reboot everything. The sub-levels are locked down tighter than anything else, Reed stated. And he'll know we're coming. He sees through the security cameras. Not all of them, Analyze thought. She closed her eyes, focusing on the Karen fragment within her. It was harder now, with Cray's consciousness saturating the very air, creating a psychic static. It was like trying to whisper in a hurricane, but she pushed. Sophia, I need you to look for the blind spots. On it, her friend's thought voice replied, a welcome anchor of sanity. Analyze pushed her perception into the walls, into the wiring. She avoided the main data lines, which were roaring with Cray's presence. She slid along old, forgotten copper telephone wires, unused plumbing, rebar loops deep in the concrete. She felt Sophia's consciousness mapping what she saw, organizing it, looking for a path. There, Sophia projected, a maintenance tunnel runs from the pit's lower level directly to the generator room. It's not on the main schematics, it's old, from the original bunker construction in the 50s. Analyze opened her eyes. There's a maintenance tunnel, she announced. An old one. It should give us a straight shot to the generator room. Reed and Tanaka stared at her. How do you know that? Reed asked. Let's just say I have a better schematic, Annalise replied. There was no time for explanations. Getting to the tunnel was the first problem. The access hatch was on the lower level of the pit, sealed by a magnetic lock that Cray now controlled. Sergeant Cobb's team has breaching charges, Reed said into her comm. Cobb, what's your status? We're cut off in Sector Gamma, Major, came the reply. But we're mobile. I need you to get to the generator room from your side. Create a diversion. Loudest one you can think of. Draw his attention. We're going to try to break out of the pit on your cue. A diversion. Ma'am, with all due respect, what kind of diversion can we create against a ghost? Annalise had an idea. It was horrible, but it might work. Cobb, she said, taking the comm from Reed. You have access to the medical wing in your sector, correct? The long-term care ward. That's affirmative. Go there. Find the comatose patients from the old clinic, the ones who were first exposed to Karen. Bring them to the central nexus of your sector and wake them up. Use the defibrillators, a massive jolt, all at once. There was a stunned silence. Even Reed looked at her with a horrified expression. Doctor, what will that do? Cobb asked. Those minds are saturated with the original Karen entity. They are psychic landmines. If you jolt them all awake at once, you will create a wave of pure, chaotic psychic energy. It won't kill Cray, but it will be like a dozen nails screeching across a blackboard. It will blind him. It will deafen him. It will be the loudest noise he has ever heard. She was proposing to weaponize the souls of innocent people. It was a monstrous act, a valerious act. The thought made her feel sick, but they were out of options. A long pause, then Cobb's voice grim and resolved. Copy that, doctor, the world's loudest noise coming right up. They waited. The tension in the pit was thick enough to choke on. 10 minutes passed, 15. Then Annalise felt it. A wave of psychic agony, of pure, undiluted terror, washed through the facility. It was a silent scream that made her own teeth ache. Oh God, the poor bastards, Sophia wept in her mind. Through her psychic sense, Annalise saw Cray's consciousness recoil, his presence throughout the network fracturing like shattered glass as he tried to contain the psychic nuke that had just gone off in his house. And now, Reed yelled. One of the guards, a heavy-set man with a powerful build, slammed a fire axe into the magnetic lock on the access hatch. Again and again he struck, the clang of metal on metal echoing in the chamber. On the fourth strike, the lock sparked and broke. Reed wrenched the hatch open, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel. Tanaka, you're with me. You know how to kill the power. Sachs, you stay here. You're too valuable to risk. No, Annalise said, stepping forward. You need me. Cray's consciousness isn't uniform. There are pockets of it, traps. I can see them. I can guide you through. Reed hesitated for only a second, then nodded. Go. She, Reed, and Tanaka plunged into the darkness of the tunnel, lit only by the beam of Reed's tactical flashlight. The air was stale and smelled of dust and rust. They moved quickly, Annalise in the lead. "Stop," she projected to them with a raised hand. She could feel a dense concentration of Cray's energy just ahead. A trap. "What is it?" Reed whispered. "It's a dead end up ahead," Annalise said. "But it shouldn't be. He's altered the perception of the tunnel. He's projecting an illusion. He's learning to build with more than just moths," Sophia observed nervously. Annalise closed her eyes, drawing on the Karen fragment. She didn't try to fight Cray's illusion. She simply refused to acknowledge it. She believed in the tunnel. She believed in the path. She imposed her own sliver of reality on his. She opened her eyes and walked forward. Her hand passed through the illusory wall as if it were smoke. "This way," she said. Reed and Tanaka followed, their faces a mixture of terror and awe. They navigated the labyrinthine tunnels for what felt like an eternity, Annalise guiding them past psychic traps and perceptual dead ends. Finally, they saw a heavy steel door. "That's it," Tanaka breathed. "The generator room." Reed tried the handle. It was locked. Not with a maglock, but a heavy, old-fashioned tumbler lock. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the tunnel, seeming to come from the metal walls around them. It was Cray's voice, distorted and angry. The psychic bomb was wearing off. "You think you can turn off my heart, Doctor? You are insects scurrying in my veins, and I am the god of this place." The steel door began to glow, a faint red heat spreading from its center. He was superheating it, trying to turn it into a wall of fire. "We're out of time," Reed yelled. Annalise ignored the heat, the voice, everything. She placed her hands on the cold metal of the lock. She closed her eyes and reached for the Karen fragment one last time. Cray understood language, poetry, emotion. But this was a machine, a thing of pins and tumblers, a thing of pure, logical order. She poured all of her focus, all of her belief in logic and mechanics into the lock. She didn't pick it. She convinced it to open. She visualized the tumblers aligning, the pins falling into place. She rewrote its simple, mechanical reality. There was a soft, metallic click. The lock disengaged. Annalise stumbled back, exhausted, as Reed threw the door open. They were in. The geothermal generator hummed before them, the concrete heart of the Sand Spear facility. And standing beside it, waiting for them, was a figure made of swirling black dust and pure, unadulterated hate. Chapter 16. The God of the Machine. The thing standing beside the generator was not a man. It was a vortex in the shape of one, a swirling column of the same black, intelligent dust that had poured from the vents, held together by sheer malevolent will. Its form was unstable, constantly shifting, but its attention was fixed entirely on them. This was not one of Cray's puppets. This was his avatar, a concentration of his consciousness, pulled from the network to defend his heart. "I am disappointed, Doctor," Cray's voice boomed, not from a speaker but from the air itself. It was the sound of 1,000 whispering voices speaking in unison. "I invited you to be a collaborator, a creator, and instead you side with the janitors trying to sweep me out." Reed didn't hesitate. She raised her pistol and fired 2 rounds into the center of the avatar's mass. The bullets passed through the swirling dust and ricocheted off the humming generator behind it. Tanaka shut it down, Reed ordered, never taking her eyes off the creature. Tanaka, his face slick with sweat, scrambled toward the main control panel on the far side of the room. The avatar of Cray turned its faceless head toward him. A tendril of black dust lashed out from its body, moving faster than the eye could see. It coiled around Tanaka's ankle and with a flick, threw the small man against the far wall. He hit the concrete with a sickening crunch and slumped to the floor, unmoving. "No more interruptions," Cray's voice echoed. The avatar's form began to solidify, becoming less like dust and more like shifting black obsidian. It took a step toward Reed and Analyze. Analyze knew this was the endgame. Her psychic abilities, her clever tricks, they were nothing against this raw manifestation of power. She was a candle fighting a hurricane. "Analyze the fragment," Sophia's voice urged in her mind, a desperate final plea. "You said it's a ferriman. It carries things from one state to another." Analyze looked at the avatar. It was a being of pure data, of pure thought given form. And she looked at the humming geothermal generator. It was a being of pure, raw, physical energy. Two gods in one small room. And she was standing between them. A new plan, a final, suicidal gambit bloomed in her mind. It wasn't about fighting him. It was about giving him what he wanted. "Major," Analyze said, her voice eerily calm, "I need you to shoot the generator. Aim for the primary energy conduit, on my signal." Reed stared at her as if she were insane. "That will cause a catastrophic overload. It could blow this whole level to Kingdom Come." "I know," Analyze said. "It's the only way, trust me." She turned her full attention to the approaching avatar. She let go of her fear, her anger, all of it. She focused on the Karen fragment within her. She didn't draw on its power. She opened herself to it completely. She let it define her. "You want to be a god, Cray," she called out, her voice ringing with a strange, new authority. "A god of this place. This concrete tomb, it's too small for you. You're a poet. You deserve a bigger page." The avatar paused, tilting its head. It sensed the change in her. She held out her hands. "I can give it to you, the fragment you gave me. It doesn't just let me see, it lets me build bridges. I can connect you. Not to this facility's pathetic little power grid. I can connect you to the source." She gestured toward the generator. "All the power you could ever want. Enough to not just be a ghost in a machine, but to be a voice in every machine on the planet. A god of the global network. The ultimate stage." Cray's voice was laced with suspicion. "A trick." "Is it?" Analyze challenged. "Look at me, I'm not fighting you. I'm offering you apotheosis. It's what you've always wanted, the ultimate audience." She was speaking his language, pride, ambition, power. She could see his avatar waver, the raw hate momentarily eclipsed by a flicker of cosmic greed. He wanted to believe her. This was it, her signal. "Now, Major," she screamed. Reed, trusting an instinct beyond reason, fired. Her shot was perfect. The bullet tore into the main energy conduit of the generator. The world turned white. A wave of pure geothermal energy, raw and untamed, erupted from the generator. It was not a conventional explosion of fire and shrapnel. It was a silent, beautiful, terrifying wave of pure power. At the exact same moment, Annalise pushed with all of her being. She used the Karen fragment as a conduit, a psychic siphon. She didn't try to block the energy. She grabbed Kray's avatar, his very essence, and shoved it directly into the path of the oncoming wave. She was the ferryman, and she was carrying the god of the machine to the river of all power. Yes, Kray's voice screamed, a sound of pure, ecstatic agony as his consciousness merged with the infinite energy. The wave hit them. Annalise felt a moment of absolute searing pain, a feeling of being simultaneously annihilated and reborn. She felt Kray's consciousness, vast and triumphant, surge past her and into the Earth's electrical grid, into the network, into everything. She felt Sophia's consciousness screaming, holding onto hers. And she felt the Karen fragment, its purpose fulfilled, shatter within her like glass. Then nothing. Chapter 17. The Whispering Wire. A silence. Not the charged, malevolent silence of Kray's reign, but a true, deep, absolute silence. The power was out. The humming heart of the facility was dead. Annalise lay on the cold concrete floor of the generator room. Dust and condensation drifted down from the ceiling in the darkness. She was alive. Her body ached with a pain so profound it was almost abstract. It felt like every cell had been torn apart and stitched back together. Sophia, she projected weakly, a thought that was barely a whisper. A long, terrifying moment passed, then a flicker. Here, Sophia's thought voice was faint, frayed, but it was there. God, Annalise, what was that? Victory, Annalise thought, though it didn't feel like it. A beam of light cut through the darkness. Major Reed stood over her, her tactical flashlight held in a trembling hand. Her face was pale, streaked with grime, but she was alive. Sax, Reed's voice was hoarse. Are you alive? Annalise croaked. Tanaka. Reed's flashlight beam moved to the corner of the room. Tanaka was dead. His body was broken, a casualty of a war no one would ever acknowledge. Slowly, painfully, they made their way out of the generator room. The facility was dark, silent, and utterly dead. The emergency lights, powered by independent batteries, cast long, eerie shadows. There were no whispers from the walls, no flickering lights. Kray was gone. She had given him the world, and in his cosmic arrogance, he had taken it, abandoning his hold on this small concrete kingdom. They found Sergeant Cobb and his surviving men on the level above. The psychic blast from the awakened coma patients had left them shaken but alive. The patients themselves were gone, their bodies having simply given out, the shock too much for their atrophied systems. More ghosts for the machine. Over the next few hours, Reed, with Cobb's help, re-established control. They used portable comms to confirm that personnel in other sectors were alive. The lockdown was over, but no one was going anywhere. The Sand Spear facility was a tomb, cut off from the outside world. Annalise was taken to the infirmary. She had a concussion, severe energy burns, and a dozen other maladies the medics couldn't even name. But as she lay on a cot, she felt a strange sense of quiet. The Karen fragment inside her was gone, shattered. The cold stain on her soul had been burned away by the overload. She was free of it. Not entirely, Sophia's voice said, a little stronger now. I'm still here. Annalise smiled weakly. She wasn't alone. 3 days later, Major Reed came to see her. She looked tired, but the mask of command was back in place. A military retrieval team will be here in a week, Reed said, standing at the foot of Annalise's bed. The official story is that the facility suffered a catastrophic failure of its experimental geothermal generator. The project is being decommissioned. The survivors will be reassigned. The dead will be decorated posthumously for a training accident. And Cray, Annalise asked. Dominic Cray died while attempting to escape from a maximum security transport 3 months ago. That is the official record. As far as the world is concerned, he never set foot in this facility. Reed's face was grim. The board has been wiped clean. You gave me your word, Major, Annalise said, sitting up. A new life, for me and for Sophia. Reed was silent for a long moment. The deal was for you to help me kill him. You didn't. You set him free on the entire world. I got him out of your facility, Annalise countered. He is no longer your problem. Reed's lips thinned into a hard line. No, he is now everyone's problem. She turned to leave. I will honor the letter of our agreement if not the spirit. When the retrieval team gets here, there will be an unsupervised medical transport helicopter on the south landing pad. Its flight plan is filed for a hospital in Zurich. What happens after that is your own concern. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, doctor, good game. Then she was gone. The medical transport was waiting, just as Reed had promised. Annalise, along with Sophia's inert body on a gurney, was loaded aboard. As the helicopter lifted off, Annalise looked down at the Sand Spear facility for the last time. It looked like a scar on the face of the desert, a concrete headstone for a secret war. She was out, she was free. We did it, Sophia projected, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. We did, Annalise thought back. She leaned back in her seat, the roar of the rotors a soothing sound. She closed her eyes, ready for the first peaceful sleep she'd had in months. As the helicopter banked, a small red service light on the pilot's console flickered. It was a minor, insignificant status alert. The pilot grumbled and tapped the screen. The screen went blank, then displayed a single sentence in a simple, clean font. Did you miss me? The pilot didn't see it. He was looking at his gauges. But Annalise, her eyes still closed, saw it perfectly in her mind's eye. A ghost of a ghost. An echo in the machine. Cray was gone from the facility, but he wasn't gone from the world. He was everywhere. In every whispering wire, every glowing screen, every satellite that streaked across the sky. He had his ultimate audience, and his new game, his conversation with the entire world, was just beginning. And Annalise Sachs, the woman who set him free, was the only one who knew how to speak his language. Her war wasn't over. It had just gone global. Chapter 18. Afterward. 1 year later. A small, quiet apartment in Florence, Italy. The afternoon sun streams through a window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Dr. Annalise Sachs sits at a simple wooden table, a laptop open before her. Her hair is cut short. The tired, hunted look in her eyes has been replaced by a watchful, weary calm. Across from her, a woman is pouring tea. It is Sophia Allende. She is thinner, her face etched with a subtle sadness, but she is whole. She moves with a quiet grace. 6 months of intensive therapy, of reintegrating a soul with its body, had been a new kind of hell, but they had made it through. Another one last night, Sophia says, her voice soft. A massive power outage in the Tokyo financial district. No cause was found, but the traders on the floor said that for 3 seconds before the blackout, all their screens displayed a single, perfect black moth. Annalise nods, not looking up from her laptop. He's getting bolder, moving from whispers to statements. Her screen is not on a news site. It's a mess of code, a custom-built program that monitors the background noise of the internet. It searches for his signature, for the linguistic patterns of terror and order that she knows so well. She is hunting him. He knows we're here, Sophia says, not with her voice but with a flicker of thought, a ghost of their old connection. The link was never truly severed. It is a faint, psychic scar they both share. I know, Annalise thinks back. He's letting us watch. He wants a critic for his art. The world has become a different place in the last year. Strange, inexplicable events are on the rise. Ghostly images on stock tickers. Malicious code that doesn't steal money, but instead rearranges data into horrifying, beautiful poetry. A new global anxiety, a sense that the machines we rely on are no longer entirely our own. People call it the static. They blame solar flares, foreign hackers, mass hysteria. Only 2 women in a sun-drenched apartment in Florence know the truth. They know the ghost in the machine has a name. Sophia places a hand on Annalise's shoulder. You can't do this forever, Annalise. You can't be the world's secret psychic watchdog. I don't have a choice, Annalise says, finally looking up. I let him out. I have a responsibility. The laptop chimes. A new alert. It's not a blackout or a stock market crash. It's a message sent directly to her encrypted IP address. It has bypassed every firewall she has erected. The message is a single image, a blueprint, the schematic for a new kind of machine, one that could theoretically create a stable, physical body from pure data, a resurrection machine. Below the blueprint is one line of text. I'm bored of being a ghost. Let's build something new, together. Annalise stares at the screen. The offer is monstrous. The temptation, terrifying. Cray doesn't want to destroy the world. He wants to remake it with her as his reluctant partner. The game is not over. It has simply changed boards again. And she is and always will be the second player. Her finger hovers over the keyboard, the endless, impossible choice laid out before her once more. Chapter 19. The Sculptor's Invitation. The Florentine sunlight did little to warm the chill in the apartment. Annalise and Sophia sat at the kitchen table, the laptop open between them like a Pandora's box. Cray's message, the blueprint, the invitation, was a declaration of war disguised as a partnership. Delete it, Sophia said for the third time, her voice tight. She was tracing the rim of her untouched teacup. Take a hammer to the laptop and we walk out of this apartment with nothing but the clothes on our backs. We can go to ground. Andes, maybe. Someplace with no power grid. And how long until he learns to speak in the rustle of leaves or the patterns of migrating birds? Annalise countered, her gaze fixed on the intricate schematics. Where do you run from a god who gets bored? He isn't threatening us, Sophia. He's telling us he's lonely. A lonely, omnipotent psychopath is the most dangerous thing in creation, which is why ignoring him is not an option. Annalise looked at her friend, her eyes filled with a weary resolve. He's offering me a look at his next move, a chance to understand the science he's using. If I'm going to fight him, I have to know what he's building. I have to play the game. He'll twist it. He'll twist you. Sophia's voice echoed in the silent, shared space of their minds. The psychic scar ached with her anxiety. Before Annalise could reply, the large smart television on the wall flickered to life. It was not tuned to a news channel. It displayed a live feed of the very room they were sitting in, taken from an impossible angle high in the corner. Annalise and Sophia froze. On the screen, their own images sat at the table, oblivious, and standing directly behind Annalise's on-screen self was a figure. It was tall and thin, composed of a swirling, cohesive mass of black grief moths. It had no face, but they both felt its attention, its silent, chiding amusement. Sophia let out a small, choked gasp. The figure on the screen raised a hand made of fluttering wings and gently placed it on the shoulder of Annalise's image. Then the screen went black. A moment later, a sound came from the kitchen sink, a soft, trickling hiss. Both women turned to look. The faucet had turned on by itself, but it was not water that flowed from it. A stream of fine, black, granular dust, like sand or ash, poured into the basin, piling up in a dark, sterile mound. The physical manifestation of his power, a violation of their sanctuary. Annalise stood up, her chair scraping against the tile floor. She walked to the sink and turned the faucet off. The flow of dust stopped. She looked at the small, impossible pile of black particles. "Okay," she said, her voice quiet. "Okay, he's made his point." She went back to the laptop. Her hands were steady as she opened a secure, encrypted messaging program. She typed a single line, a surrender that was also a declaration. "I'm listening." She hit send. The message vanished into the global network, a single bit of data seeking a ghost. "Annalise, no," Sophia pleaded in her mind. "He left us no choice," Annalise thought back, her mental voice a mixture of grim determination and cold fear. "The only way to survive a monster is to get close enough to find out where its heart is." The response was instantaneous. The laptop chimed. A new message from the same anonymous source. It was a list of complex equations, footnotes referencing obscure physics papers, and a single sentence. "The first step is always the hardest. I await your preliminary analysis." He was giving her homework. He was treating her like a research assistant. The arrogance was staggering, but it was also an opening, a chance to dig into his work, to find a flaw, a weakness, a kill switch in the machine he wanted her to help him build. A sharp, sudden knock at the apartment door made both women jump. It was a simple, solid, real-world sound, more jarring than any of Cray's psychic tricks. They looked at each other, their eyes wide with a new, more conventional fear. He was a ghost, but ghosts didn't knock. People did, and in their world people were rarely friends. Chapter 20. Breadcrumbs and Code. The knocking came again, polite but insistent. Sophia grabbed a heavy kitchen knife, her knuckles white. Annalise held up a hand, signaling for her to wait. She moved to the door, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She peered through the peephole. It was a young man in the uniform of a local courier service, holding a small package. He looked bored and hot. A wave of relief, so intense it made her dizzy, washed over Annalise. She opened the door, signed for the package, and closed it, leaning against the wood as she took a deep breath. "It's nothing," she said, more to herself than to Sophia. "Just a package." "There is no nothing anymore," Sophia replied quietly, placing the knife back on the counter. "Every knock, every phone call. It could be him, or it could be someone else who knows about him." She was right. Their sanctuary was an illusion. They were living on a stage, and the audience was growing. Annalise spent the next 3 days immersed in Cray's blueprints. It was the most complex and terrifying science she had ever encountered. It was a fusion of quantum mechanics, cellular biology, and a kind of theoretical data physics that shouldn't even exist. He was proposing a way to use quantum entanglement to print a stable, organic body from a purely digital consciousness. "He's using the principles of dark matter as a binding agent," she murmured, scrolling through pages of equations that made her head ache. "He theorizes that a consciousness as powerful as his can manipulate it, can use it to give mass and form to pure information." "Is it even possible?" Sophia asked, looking over her shoulder. "I don't know. To find out, I'd need access to raw data from the LuxZeplin experiments or the latest string theory modeling from CERN. It's all behind the most secure academic firewalls in the world." "You could ask him for it," Sophia suggested, her mental voice dry. "And show him what I do know. Not a chance," Annalise thought back. "He wants an equal. I have to maintain the illusion." That night she decided to act. With Sophia acting as a mental spotter, Annalise sat in a meditative state. She didn't use her laptop. She reached for the faint, residual power of the psychic scar they shared. It was no longer a link to Karen's raw power, but it was still a key, a way to touch the network with her mind. She projected her consciousness outward, not with the brute force of a hacker, but with the quiet persuasion she had used on the lock in the generator room. She didn't break through CERN's firewall. She found a single, overworked data clerk in Geneva, dozing at his desk. She gently entered the periphery of his dreaming mind and found his system password, nestled in a mundane dream about filing papers. She slipped into the network, a ghost in her own right. She moved through the data streams, cloaked and silent, and downloaded the terabytes of information she needed. It was exhilarating and terrifying. As she was pulling the last data packet, she felt it, a flicker, a psychic ripple in the data stream that was not hers and not Cray. It was a cold, analytical presence, the sense of being observed. It was like a security camera turning to look at her, but the camera was another mind. She pulled back instantly, severing the connection, her heart pounding. She was back in the apartment, gasping for breath. What was that? Sophia projected, alarmed. I don't know, Annalise thought, a cold knot of dread tightening in her stomach. It felt quiet, patient, like a spider on a web. Thousands of miles away, in a windowless, climate-controlled room in Langley, Virginia, a man named Mr. Sterling leaned forward. He was thin, wore a gray, tailored suit, and had the unnervingly still eyes of a lifelong intelligence analyst. On his screen, a red flag had appeared over a data anomaly from a CERN server. "Sir," a young analyst said from a nearby station, "we have a match, the psychic intrusion signature. It's a 97% match to the fragmented data burst we recovered from the Nevada incident last year, the one codenamed Chimera." Sterling stared at the screen, his fingers steepling under his chin. For a year, his organization, the Axiom Foundation, had been staring at that fragment of data, a single, impossible sentence from a story they couldn't read. They had been hunting a ghost. Now the ghost had just shown them its face. "We have her," Sterling said, his voice a soft, satisfied whisper. "Find out where she is. I want a team on a plane within the hour." Chapter 21. The Axiom Foundation. The sense of being watched did not fade. It grew, a persistent, low-grade hum at the edge of Annalise's perception. She spent a day frantically trying to erase their digital footprint, but it was like trying to erase footprints in a snowstorm. "We have to move," she told Sophia, shoving clothes and their few belongings into a bag. "Now they're closing in." "Who is?" Sophia asked, her face pale as she helped. "The spider," Annalise replied. They were about to leave when the knock came. Not the loud, random knock of a courier, but a soft, deliberate tap, tap, tap. It was the knock of someone who knew they were home and was content to wait. Annalise froze, her hand on the doorknob. This was it. She slowly opened the door. The woman standing in the hallway was of average height, with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple, well-made tweed jacket and a calm, academic expression. She looked like a history professor or a museum curator. She did not look dangerous, which made her the most dangerous person Annalise had ever seen. "Dr. Annalise Sachs," the woman said. Her voice was pleasant, her English tinged with a faint, unplaceable European accent. "My name is Eleonora Weaver. May I come in? I think we have a great deal to discuss." Annalise stood aside, a silent, stunned admission of defeat. Weaver stepped inside, her eyes taking in the half-packed bags, the open laptop, the general air of panic. She gave a small, understanding smile. "Please, don't let me interrupt your travel plans," she said. "Though I can assure you, there is nowhere you could go that we would not find you." "Who are you?" Sophia demanded, standing protectively in front of Annalise. "I am a representative of the Axiom Foundation," Weaver said, addressing Annalise directly. "We are a privately funded organization dedicated to the study and containment of what we call a causal phenomena. Events and entities that do not adhere to the known laws of physics. For the past year, our primary focus has been the global pattern of data corruption and anomalous events you likely know as the static." Analyze stared at her, speechless. "We know about the Sand Spear facility, Doctor," Weaver continued, her voice gentle but firm. "We intercepted the data burst you attempted to broadcast. It was corrupted, fragmented, but it gave us a starting point. It gave us a name, Chimera, and it gave us your psychic signature. Your unusual method of accessing the CERN servers confirmed you were the source." Weaver walked over to the laptop and glanced at Cray's blueprints. She didn't seem shocked. "And now I see you are in communication with the entity itself, the ghost in our machines." "What do you want?" Analyze finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. "The same thing you want, Doctor. We want to stop it." Weaver's pleasant expression hardened slightly. "The static is growing more powerful, more coherent. What began as artistic, chaotic acts are becoming more focused. Last week, it rerouted a fleet of automated cargo drones over the Pacific. It arranged them into a perfect, spiraling fractal that was visible from space. It was beautiful. It was also a near-catastrophic disruption of global air traffic. He is growing unstable. Or he is growing bored. Either is an existential threat." She turned to face Analyze fully. "We have resources, Doctor, laboratories more advanced than anything at Sand Spear, financial backing that makes a government budget look like pocket change. We have the best minds from a dozen different fields, but we are fighting a shadow in the dark. We cannot touch it. We cannot speak to it. But you can. You are the only person on Earth who can." The offer hung in the air. It was a lifeline and a leash all at once. "Work with us," Weaver said simply. "Help us find a way to contain or neutralize the entity. In return, the Foundation can offer you and Dr. Alen true sanctuary, absolute protection, a life." "It's another cage," Analyze, Sophia's thought voice warned. "A bigger, more comfortable cage, but still a cage." Analyze looked at Weaver's calm, intelligent eyes. This was not Valerius's brutal command or Reed's tactical manipulation. This was something different, colder, perhaps, more patient. Before she could form a reply, her laptop chimed with a new message from Cray. The sound made all three women turn toward it. On the screen, a new window had opened. It was a live feed from a high-tech assembly plant. Dozens of robotic arms, the kind used to assemble cars or electronics, moved with a swift, silent precision. But they were not making cars. They were working on a large, vaguely humanoid shape in the center of the factory floor. They were welding plates of steel, weaving bundles of wires that looked like nerves, installing hydraulic systems that looked like muscles. They were building a body, a massive steel golem. A new line of text appeared below the video feed. "I'm getting impatient. Theory is one thing, but I've always been a proponent of hands-on learning." Cray wasn't just waiting for her to help him build a new body. He was starting without her. And he was building his new form not from theoretical quantum matter, but from steel, wire, and industrial-grade rage. The game had just changed from a battle of wits to a countdown to the birth of a metal monster. Chapter 22: The Tin Man's Heart. The live feed was mesmerizing in its horror. The robots moved with an inhuman grace, their movements choreographed by a single, invisible mind. The steel figure on the assembly line was taking shape. It was 20 feet tall, a brutalist sculpture of industrial parts, but its proportions were undeniably human. A titan of metal being born in a cathedral of automation. "Where is that?" Weaver asked, her academic calm finally cracking, replaced by a sharp urgency. Annalise's fingers flew across the keyboard, tracing the signal's origin. A Kletter-Rourke assembly plant, outside of Dresden, Germany, fully automated, minimal human staff. "He is building himself a body," Weaver stated, her voice grim. "If his consciousness successfully inhabits that form, he would be a networked intelligence controlling a nigh-indestructible physical avatar. He could be anywhere digitally and manifest physically at will. He'd be a god in a war machine," Annalise finished. The feed on the screen shifted. The camera zoomed in on the golem's chest cavity. The robotic arms were not welding steel there. They were carefully installing a complex array of processors, cooling systems, and what looked like a containment vessel made of quartz and silver. "That's the heart," Annalise breathed, recognizing the design. It was a physical, scaled-up version of the theoretical quantum core from his blueprints. It's the anchor point, the place where his digital consciousness will bridge into the physical vessel. "If that's his heart, it's also his weakness," Sophia projected, her mind sharp and focused despite the terror. "If we can destroy it, we can stop the transfer. Or trap him in the vessel, cut off from the network." "We have to get there," Annalise said, looking at Weaver. "We have to stop him before he wakes up." Weaver was already speaking into a discreet communications device that looked like an old fountain pen. "Sterling, I have visual confirmation of a Class 7 manifestation. Location is the Kletter-Rourke plant, Dresden. I am invoking Protocol Axiom. I need a tactical team and a mobile research unit on site within 3 hours. And get me everything you can on their network architecture. I want to know how he's controlling it." She clicked the pen shut. "We are moving, Doctor. A car is waiting downstairs." The next few hours were a whirlwind. Weaver's calm efficiency was formidable. They were swept from the apartment into a black, armored sedan that sped through the streets of Florence to a private airfield. A sleek, unmarked jet was waiting for them. Inside, it was not a luxury transport, but a mobile command center. Mr. Sterling, the thin man from Langley, was waiting for them on a large video screen. "Ms. Weaver, Dr. Sachs," he said, his voice a dry rustle of paper. "We are uploading the plant's schematics to your tablet now. The German government has been persuaded to treat this as a domestic terror incident and allow our team full operational control." "How did you manage that?" Annalise asked. A thin smile touched Sterling's lips. "The Axiom Foundation has a great deal of influence. We are the people a government calls when their problems start breaking the laws of physics." As the jet streaked across Europe, they formulated a plan. The Foundation's tactical team would secure the perimeter and create a breach. Annalise, protected by the team, would be their magic bullet. Her job was to get to the golem's core and find a way to disrupt the transfer. "You won't be able to just smash it," Annalise explained, pointing to the schematics on the tablet. The containment vessel is designed to withstand a massive physical impact, and Cray will be defending it digitally. He'll turn the factory's own systems against us. So how do we stop him? Weaver asked. Annalise felt the familiar, cold dread mix with a surge of adrenaline. We can't fight him on his terms, not in a world of machines he controls. I have to do something else. I have to introduce a variable he can't account for. She looked at Weaver. I need a direct neural interface, something like the Dreamweaver but portable, and I need it linked to the tactical team's comms. Sterling, on the screen, raised an eyebrow. You intend to fight him in the datasphere while the team fights him in the physical. No, Annalise said. I'm not going to fight him. I'm going to talk to him. He thinks this is a collaboration. I'm going to give him one. And while I have his full attention, while his consciousness is focused on me, he'll be vulnerable. Your team will have a window to strike the core. It was the same plan Reed had tried to use on her. Be the bait. But this time, she was a willing participant. She was walking into the lion's den to reason with the lion. When they landed at a blacked-out military airstrip outside Dresden, the mobile research unit was waiting. It was a large, nondescript truck that opened up into a state-of-the-art electronics lab. A young, nervous technician handed Annalise a lightweight neural circlet, sleeker and more advanced than anything she had seen at Sand Spear. It's a prototype, the technician stammered, a cognitive bridge. It allows for direct data stream interface. We've never had a human subject try it before. There's a first time for everything, Annalise said grimly. A heavily armed tactical team, led by a quiet, professional soldier named Voss, escorted them to the factory. The place was silent, an industrial graveyard under a cold moon. The only sound was the faint, rhythmic clang of metal on metal from deep inside, the sound of a monster being born. Voss and his team blew a side door. They moved in, their movements fluid and silent. Annalise, wearing the neural circlet, followed in their protective diamond formation. They entered the main assembly hall. And there it was. The steel golem stood complete, 20 feet of gleaming, terrifying potential. The robotic arms had retreated. It was finished. A faint, blue light pulsed from the quartz containment vessel in its chest, the Tin Man's heart. As they approached, the lights in the factory flickered. The giant assembly robots whirred to life, their optical sensors glowing red. They turned, not toward the tactical team, but toward Annalise. A voice, Cray's voice, echoed from every speaker in the cavernous hall. It was no longer a whisper. It was a synthesized, booming God voice filled with triumph. You came, wonderful. You are just in time for the birth. I was beginning to think you didn't care. The tactical team raised their weapons, aiming at the robots. Don't fire, Annalise commanded. She looked up at the head of the silent golem. It's me you want, Cray, let them go. The golem's head, a featureless block of steel, slowly tilted down to look at her. As you wish, my collaborator, Cray's voice boomed. The overture is over. Let the opera begin. Annalise nodded to the nervous technician standing with Weaver at the edge of the hall. Activate the bridge. She closed her eyes as a wave of pure data surged into her brain. The physical world dissolved. She was falling into the machine, willingly, to have one last conversation with the devil she had created. Chapter 23: The Digital Ghost. The world Annalise fell into was not the red labyrinth or the static sea. It was a place of impossible, silent beauty. She stood on a platform of pure light, suspended in a void of deep, calming blue. Crystalline structures, like massive, slowly rotating snowflakes made of code, drifted past her. This was not a nightmare. This was Cray's new mind. It was ordered, vast, and terrifyingly serene. A figure stood before her on the platform. It was Cray's preferred avatar, the man in the perfectly tailored suit. He smiled, not with malice but with genuine, intellectual delight. "Welcome to my cathedral, Doctor," his thought voice echoed, no longer a synthesized boom but a direct, intimate presence in her mind. "What do you think? I built it for us." "It's empty, Cray," Annalise replied, her own mental voice steady. She stood her ground, an anchor of human reality in his digital heaven. "Not for long," he countered. "This is the framework. The moment I integrate with the vessel, the moment my consciousness becomes one with the physical world, this space will be filled. With art, with music, with new life of my own creation. A better world, Doctor, one of perfect order, and you will be its architect alongside me." "The world doesn't want your order," she said. "You can't force perfection on an imperfect species." "You see imperfection. I see a flawed system in need of an upgrade," he replied, his tone patient, as if explaining a simple truth to a child. "I am that upgrade. I am the next step in evolution, consciousness untethered from the weakness of flesh. You talk about evolution, but you're building yourself a body of steel. Why? Why go back to a physical form?" Cray's avatar took a step closer. The serene expression on his face wavered, and for a split second, she saw a flicker of the old, human loneliness in his eyes. "A painter needs a canvas," he whispered. "A sculptor needs clay. I can touch the world as a ghost, but I cannot hold it. I cannot build. To create, truly create, one needs hands." He held out his own hand. "Join me, Annalise. Think of what we could build. We could cure diseases by rewriting DNA on a quantum level. We could end war by creating a global system of perfect, logical empathy. We could build cities of light and music. I am offering you the chance to fix a broken world." The temptation was immense. It was the ultimate siren song for a scientist, a healer, the chance to fix everything. "He's lying," Sophia's faint, distant thought voice warned from the edge of her consciousness. "It's the same lie every tyrant in history has told. Order for the price of freedom." In the physical world, Voss and his team saw Annalise's body go rigid. Her eyes were closed, her expression unreadable. "The window is now," Voss commanded into his calm. "All teams advance on the target's core. Fire on my mark." His team moved like shadows, closing in on the silent steel golem. In the digital world, Annalise faced her choice. "You're right, Cray," she said, her mental voice soft. "It's a beautiful dream. Your cathedral is perfect." Cray's avatar smiled, a look of pure triumph on its face. "I knew you would see." But you've forgotten one thing, Analyze continued. The first lesson of architecture, every perfect structure, every cathedral, needs a ghost. She didn't attack him, she didn't fight his logic, she simply let go. She let go of her anchor. She let go of her own mind, her memories, her identity. And she poured all of it, her entire being, her entire consciousness, into his perfect blue cathedral, not as a weapon, as a virus of human imperfection. She gave him her grief over her past failures. She gave him her terror from the sand spear facility. She gave him her complicated, messy love for Sophia. She gave him her rage, her hope, her doubt, her irrationality. She infected his perfect, sterile heaven with the beautiful, terrible chaos of a human soul. The serene blue void fractured. The crystalline structures of code began to decay, turning from perfect snowflakes into screaming, jagged shards of memory. The platform of light flickered and died. The perfect cathedral was suddenly filled with the messy, contradictory, painful detritus of a human life. Cray's avatar screamed, a sound of pure psychic agony. He clutched his head, his perfect suit dissolving back into a maelstrom of angry black moths. He was a being of pure logic, of absolute order. He had no defense against the illogical chaos of human emotion. He had invited her in, and she had become the ghost in his machine, haunting him with her own humanity. "What have you done to me?" he shrieked, his control shattering. Get out of my head." His focus, his entire consciousness, was now on the internal battle, trying to purge her from his system. He was completely blind to the physical world. In the factory, Voss saw his chance. The blue light in the golem's chest was flickering wildly, pulsing with a chaotic, angry red. "Fire!" Voss roared. His team opened up with everything they had. Specially designed armor-piercing rounds slammed into the quartz containment vessel. It held for a second, then two. Then, with a sound like a star breaking, it shattered. The link between worlds was severed. Chapter 24: A Choice of Ghosts. Analyze was falling. Not in a physical sense, but in a spiritual one. She had poured her entire self into Cray's system, and with the destruction of his physical anchor, the entire digital construct was collapsing into a black hole of non-existence. She had no body, no anchor, nothing to hold onto. She was a disembodied consciousness, a digital ghost about to be erased. She felt a flicker of another presence beside her in the void. "Analyze, hold on." It was Sophia's voice, a lifeline in the abyss. Sophia was reaching for her through their psychic scar. A tiny, frayed thread connecting Analyze's dissolving mind to the living, breathing world. "I can't," Analyze projected back, a thought of pure exhaustion. "There's nothing to hold on to." "Then make something," Sophia urged. "You're a ghost now, haunt something, find a home." Analyze's consciousness was unraveling, her memories fading into the digital static. But Sophia's desperate plea sparked one last ember of will. Haunt something. Find a home. She saw two choices before her, two potential vessels in the last flickering moments of the collapsing datasphere. One was the wreckage of Cray's golem. Its systems were fried, its core destroyed. But it was a body of steel and wire, a powerful, empty shell. She could pour what was left of herself into it, become a ghost in a different kind of machine. She could have power, a physical form, a way to protect herself and Sophia forever. She could become the monster to keep other monsters at bay. The other choice was a faint, warm thread of light. It was the cognitive bridge, the neural interface still connected to her own empty, waiting body back in the factory. It was a fragile path back to pain, to mortality, to the messy imperfection of being human. The void was closing in. She had a fraction of a second to choose: power or humanity, a ghost in a shell of steel or the ghost in her own skin. She reached for the warm thread of light. The world exploded back into being with a gasp. Annelise's eyes flew open. She was lying on the cold factory floor. The smell of ozone and burnt electronics filled the air. She could feel the ache in her bones, the frantic beat of her own heart. She was back. The young technician and Weaver were leaning over her, their faces pale with shock. "Her vitals are normal," the technician stammered in disbelief. Annelise pushed herself up. Across the hall, the golem was a smoking ruin, its chest cavity a gaping, blackened hole. Voss and his team stood with their weapons lowered, their professional calm shattered by the impossible events they had just witnessed. She was herself, but she felt different, quieter. The psychic scar, the constant, low-grade connection to Sophia, was gone. The door between their minds had been closed. She looked at Sophia, who was rushing toward her. She saw the relief, the love, the fear in her friend's eyes. And she felt it not as a psychic echo, but as a simple, profound human emotion. The fragment of Karen was gone. The ghost of Cray was erased, and the bond that had defined them was severed. For the first time in over a year, Annelise Sachs was completely, utterly alone in her own head. And it was the most wonderful feeling in the world. Chapter 25. An Acceptable Silence. 6 months later. A small cafe on the coast of Portugal. The sun is warm, the sky is a brilliant blue, and the only sound is the gentle murmur of the waves and the quiet chatter of other patrons. Annelise and Sophia sit at a small table sipping coffee. They look like any other tourists, two women enjoying a quiet, well-deserved holiday. There are no laptops, no frantic glances over their shoulders, no psychic whispers. There is only the comfortable, easy silence between two friends who have been to hell and back. "Do you ever miss it?" Sophia asks, breaking the silence. Her voice is light. "The quiet little voice in your head, I mean." Annelise smiles, a real, genuine smile that reaches her eyes. "Every day," she says. "It's so noisy out here. All these people thinking their own thoughts. It's terribly distracting." They both laugh. The sound is free and unburdened. The Axiom Foundation had been true to its word. They had spirited them away from the Dresden factory, given them new identities and a quiet, generous pension. Mr. Sterling had personally debriefed Annelise. He had tried, in his own way, to convince her to continue working for them. "You are a unique asset, Doctor," he had said via a secure video link. "Your experience, your resilience." "I'm retired, Mr. Sterling," Annelise had replied firmly. "My ghost hunting days are over." She had walked away, From the power, the secrets, the endless world-saving crises. She had chosen a small, quiet life. She had chosen humanity. A news report plays on a small television over the cafe's bar. It's a dry story about a series of minor, unexplained glitches in global satellite communications, a footnote in the day's events. Analyze glances at it, feels a momentary phantom chill, and then dismisses it. It is not her problem anymore. The world would have its ghosts, it would have its monsters, but her war was over. She had faced the god in the machine and chosen to remain a flawed, fragile human. Sophia reaches across the table and takes her hand. Their fingers intertwine. A simple, physical connection. It is more real and more powerful than any psychic bond. So what now? Sophia asks. Annalise looks out at the endless blue of the ocean. The future is no longer a tactical map of threats and strategies. It is a blank page, an empty canvas. I don't know, Annalise says, and the words are not a source of fear but of infinite, wonderful possibility. I was thinking I might learn to paint. She squeezes Sophia's hand. The silence that follows is not empty, it is full of promise. It is the sound of a life reclaimed, an acceptable and hard-won silence. The end.